In this world, there are several different species roaming the planet, each with their own special strengths and abilities. And then there are humans like Light who are pretty much useless. One day, Light leaves his home in hopes of becoming an adventurer and heads to the big city so he can sign up. Upon arrival, he meets one of the receptionists there and she helps him through the registration process. Since this is his first time registering at the guild, she tells him he will be starting at F rank, and just to make sure Light won't be completely worthless, she asks him if he at least has a gift he can use, and Light excitedly informs her that his ability is gacha gambling. The receptionist freezes up for a moment because she doesn't think she heard him right, but it's exactly what it sounds like. Light has the ability to summon a gacha wheel, and by pressing it, he gets a random item each time. He wants to give her a demonstration, so he pushes the button, and the item he receives is a bent fork. Okay, let's hear him out. That one was probably just a fluke, so he tries again, but this time he just gets some food, and it's not even the good kind either. The receptionist sighs and politely tells Light he's never making it out of F rank with an ability like that. Light asks her if there is any work he can accept as an F ranker, and she directs him to the bulletin board where all the available jobs are posted. But on top of being useless, he's never been to school, so he doesn't know how to read. The receptionist understands his struggle, so she takes out a list and tells Light that the best options for him at the moment are the firewood gathering, soil hauling, or landscaping jobs, but the pay is barely scraping minimum wage, so he won't earn much from it. Light says he'll happily do it, so later that day, he is out doing as much manual labor as his little body can handle. And by nightfall, he has barely earned enough money to cover his lodging expenses. However, as he is walking down the street, a group of beastmen happen to be passing by, and they immediately clock Light as a victim, so they intentionally bump into him and steal his money. Light begs them to give it back because without it, he's going to have to spend the night on the street. But the beastmen don't care, and frankly, neither does anyone else since regular humans are at the bottom of the species hierarchy, so no one is willing to stand up for him. Light sits in the mud while all the people passing by call him useless trash for no reason, until eventually, someone actually stops to lend him a hand. Light takes the woman's hand thinking she's a fellow human, but when he realizes she's an elf, he recoils in fear because he thinks he's about to be taken advantage of again. The elf tells him he doesn't have to worry, and to prove it, she gets down on her knees in the mud just to hug him. Light can hardly believe that an elf would treat a human like him with such kindness, but she doesn't seem to be lying, so Light decides to go along with it. She introduces him to the rest of her party members and explains that they are the Concord of Tribes, a party that incorporates members from all 9 races across the world with the goal of eradicating discrimination among races. The leader is a beastman named Guru, and the elf's name is Sasha. They already got members from most of the different races, so now the only thing they need is a human to become their 9th member, and that's why they want to ask Light to join their party. This all sounds good on paper, but of all the people they could get, they really had to choose the powerless and defenseless 12-year-old boy to join their special party. At least there's no baby oil this time. From then on, whenever Concord would go on a mission, Light would join them as their baggage handler, but he's still just as useless as he was before because not even 10 minutes in, he almost gets one-shotted by a giant snake monster. Fortunately, Drago and Sasha manage to save him before anything bad happens, but Sasha tells him he really needs to get his act together because this is one of the world's most dangerous dungeons and literally anything in here could kill him, so he needs to make sure he sticks close to the team. Light apologizes for his mistake, but Sasha doesn't want him to feel too bad about himself, so she just asks him to come closer so she can check if he's hurt or not. While she's busy looking after Light, the others come over and start teasing Sasha for always doting on Light any chance she gets. They are done here, so the group continues moving further into the dungeon with Light in the center so nothing bad can happen to him. But once they get to a narrow section of the path, Guru says this will be a good place to stop. Light assumes he means he wants them to take a break, so he sets his bag down and starts making some tea for everyone, but Drago tells him that won't be necessary because they are actually here to banish him from the party. Light can't believe what he just heard, so he asks them if this is some sort of prank, but literally everyone in the party, including Sasha who was being so nice to him a minute ago, suddenly does a 180 and calls Light an ugly, brainless, good-for-nothing human. Light doesn't understand what's going on, so they all explain to him that they've been pretending to like him this entire time, and that whole thing about wanting to get rid of discrimination. That was a total lie. In fact, they are some of the most racist people you'll ever meet, so they've been dying to get rid of Light since the day he joined them. If that's the case, then Light asks why they even bothered asking him to join in the first place, so Guru tells him they were only after him because of his skill. Light doesn't understand what he means since his gacha skill is as useless as it gets, but while that may be true, it's similar to the skill of the Maestro, and the Concord's higher-ups were interested in seeing if Light's skill would evolve into something that's actually useful, so they were told to be nice to him until then, even though they didn't want to. However, those same higher-ups recently decided that Light was a lost cause, so now the party has no reason to act like they care about him in the slightest. Light can't wrap his head around everything they just said, and the group realizes they might have let too much information slip, but it's not like it's going to matter soon, because Light isn't leaving this dungeon alive. His eyes go wide as soon as he hears them say that, and a second later, Garou uses his claws to slash him across the face, making it very clear that they really do intend to kill him. He takes off running to get away from them, but they all just laugh and tell him that even if he did manage to escape, he'd just end up dying to a random monster in the dungeon. With that said, they think it'll be much more fun to kill him with their own hands, so Sasha takes her bow and shoots him through the thigh to stop him from escaping. They are all enjoying the sound of Light's terror-filled cries, and Garou begins beating him up to get him to cry some more. But the others tell him to quit it because their cover story is meant to be that Light was killed by a surprise monster attack, so they can't give him any suspicious injuries. Light desperately tries to crawl away because he doesn't want to die here. But with his leg injured like this, Garou tells him there's no way he's going to escape. Even so, he continues trying to get away, and as luck would have it, he managed to trigger a teleportation trap. The trap sends him straight to one of the deeper floors, so Light is now safe from the Concord members, but that doesn't mean he is going to survive this. He is well aware of how weak he is, so he knows he's a goner the second a single monster shows up. He tries coming to terms with the fact that this is the end of the road, but he doesn't understand why all this happened to him. For the past 4 years, all the members of Concord had treated him with respect and kindness, but it all turned out to be a lie. They were just using him because they thought he was a Mastro, and when they found out he wasn't, they tried to kill him laughing in his face. He absolutely refuses to let them get away with that. No matter how hard it is, he swears that he will make it out of here alive and kill them all, even if it's the last thing he ever does. However, just then, Light hears something walk up behind him, and to his horror, he finds a level 1000 stone chimera staring him down. Even the strongest adventurers only have a few hundred levels, and he has never seen a monster like this before, so that must mean he was teleported to one of the lowest parts of the abyss. As the monster approaches him, he practically pisses himself in fear because he knows there's no way he can beat this thing. All he has right now is his Gacha ability, and has a terrible track record when it comes to being useful. He has no other option, so he frantically starts pushing the button over and over, hoping that it will save him, and miraculously, as the monster lunges at him, his Gacha wheel transforms and a beautiful maid girl appears, destroying the monster in an instant. Light is speechless after what he just witnessed, so he just sits there as the girl walks up to him. She kneels before Light and puts her hand on his cheek to heal his wound because she couldn't bear the sight of such scars on his beautiful body. Light is amazed because all the pain is gone now. The maid refers to him as Master and asks what his name is, so he tells her that he is called Light, and right there and then she swears to serve him with eternal loyalty for the rest of her life. Her name is Mai, and she is known as the Ever-Seeking Maid. As for her level, it's over 9,000. She says she is an ultra-rare pull from Light's Gacha skill, so her very being is bound to him. But Light is having trouble processing all this since he has always thought his Gacha skill was completely worthless, so it should be impossible for someone as amazing as Mai to come out of it. Mai asks him for permission to approach his ability so she can determine its true nature. Light is surprised to learn that Mai has an appraisal ability, but to be clear, she tells him that it's only one of her many skills. Light tells her she's free to appraise him, so she begins the scan, and she is truly amazed by what she sees. Light's Gacha skill has dozens of layers of protection woven into it, so only people of Mai's level are able to see its true capabilities, and from what she can tell, it can be used an unlimited number of times. The rewards that it generates depend on the surrounding mana density and go all the way from ranks like EX and Super Ultra Rare to Normal and Error. Light doesn't really understand what Mai is talking about, so she explains that there is always mana present in the atmosphere. But the mana density on the surface is quite low, which reduces the chances of unlocking a useful reward like Mai to almost zero. However, in the deepest part of a dungeon like this, the mana density is incredibly high, so the probability of a successful summon shot up exponentially. Mai assumes Light must have intentionally ventured down to the depths of the dungeon to bring out the true potential of his gift, but that couldn't be further from the truth. He came down here with people he thought he could trust, but they all ended up betraying him. They slashed his face, shot him in the leg, and laughed at him the entire time they did it. All Light ever wanted was to give his family a better life, but they tried to kill him just because he's a human. He begins yelling that he will never forgive them for as long as he lives, but Mai pulls Light into a hug for comfort because she hates seeing him so sad. She knows she could never understand the suffering Light must have felt, but she knows how to make him feel better. She assures Light that as soon as he gives the order, she will have the heads of those backstabbers lined up on the floor within the hour, but he gets up and tells her she can't do that. Mai tells him that scoundrels like those people do not deserve mercy, but he didn't tell her to wait because he thinks killing them would be wrong. Rather, it's because he wants to be the one to get revenge with his own two hands. He fell for their trick and nearly died at their hands because he was too weak to defend himself, so he wants to become strong enough to make sure nothing like that ever happens to him again. He knows it sounds far-fetched for a weakling like him to say he wants to be strong, but Mai doesn't think it's impossible at all. She swears that if he wants to become strong enough to exact revenge on his own, then she will do everything within her power to make that happen. We cut to 3 years into the future, and right in the middle of the Abyss dungeon, Light has used his gacha skill to build an entire nation and summon an army of powerful servants who are so down bad for him that they pay good money to get a cup of his bathwater. As he and May walk down the halls, she gets really annoyed by all the fairy maids constantly trying to get Light's attention, but Light doesn't see it as a problem since it's just a sign of their devotion to him. They head out into the city to greet Light's people, and everyone here truly loves and respects him as their leader. One even brings up that the monthly sweet supply is running low, and Light promises to look into getting some more. He thinks it might be a supply chain issue since the city has way more people now than it did 3 years ago, so he will have to adjust things to satisfy the increased demand. In the meantime, Light asks May if she knows what the other super elite servants he summoned are up to right now, so she tells him that Oyuki is busy napping out the area around the Abyss, and Ellie has been busy researching new magic to help Light achieve his goals. He's grateful that everyone is doing so much to help him out, but May didn't mention anything about Nezuna, so he wonders what she's been up to lately. May explains that Nezuna is just patrolling the inside the castle for now, but it's not because they need added security inside, it's because she's too dumb to help with anything that doesn't involve fighting. Meanwhile, inside the castle, we see Nezuna cheerfully strolling through the hallways without a care in the world, but as long as she's not causing trouble, they usually just let her do whatever she wants. As for Light, it is now time for his daily training session, so he goes to meet with one of his elite summons, Jack. Even though he has all these powerful subordinates to protect him, he still wants to be strong enough to handle things on his own, so he often goes out to spar with Jack, and after 3 years of this routine, he is capable of going blow for blow with him. Back in the castle, Nezuna is still walking around aimlessly until she happens to run into a few of the maids handling cleaning duty for today. She tells them she's on a super important patrol mission right now, and the maids all tell her that she's doing a really good job, but they are really just trying to flatter her into doing them a favor, and it's working. Now that she's in a good mood, they tell her that there's a special place that they'd like her to patrol for them, and Nezuna agrees to listen to their request without a second thought. A few minutes later, Nezuna knocks on the door to Light's bedroom, but to her surprise, May is the one who answers. She asks Nezuna what she's doing here, and Nezuna proudly states that she's on patrol, which is technically true. But now that she thinks about it, she wonders what May is doing in Light's room in the first place, since he's supposed to be training with Jack right now. May tries to make up an excuse and says she was just cleaning Light's room for him while he is away, but while she was talking, Nezuna manages to slip inside, and it definitely doesn't look like May was doing much cleaning in here. In fact, if Nezuna had to guess, she'd say May was rolling around on Light's bed and sniffing his pillow until a moment ago. May panics and says that was just part of her special bed-making technique, and Nezuna doesn't question how dumb that sounds for you in 1 second, so she starts praising May for doing such a good job. Speaking of jobs, she finally remembers that the fairy maids asked her to deliver a message to May, and it basically says they are tired of her keeping Light's room to herself all the time because they want to clean his stuff too. Nezuna doesn't really understand what the big fuss is about, but May receive the message loud and clear, so she gives Nezuna a little reward for her trouble and sends her on her way. Now that she's done delivering the message, she heads down to the pastry shop to buy herself a treat with the money May gave her, and afterwards she happens to run into Oyuki on one of the terraces. Nezuna is surprised to see her here since she thought Oyuki was out on a surveillance mission, but she just keeps mewing, so Nezuna has no idea what she's saying. Light is usually able to decipher what those mews are meant to mean, but Nezuna's best guess is that Oyuki wants Nezuna to destroy the entire forest for her for no reason. Nezuna would definitely do that too, if no one corrected her, so Oyuki is forced to break character and speak normally to tell Nezuna that she just came to deliver a section of the map that she completed. Nezuna laughs and tells Oyuki she should have just said that from the beginning, so she takes the map and heads off to continue her patrol. Her next stop is the throne room, and after making sure there's no one around, she starts hugging Light's throne because she hasn't gotten to see him at all today. But while she is doing that, she suddenly hears a loud crunch sound, and to her horror, she realizes that she just broke the wing off one of the throne fixtures. She's going to get in a lot of trouble if anyone finds out about this, so she frantically fixes it just enough so it will break as soon as someone else touches it, and then she bolts out of there. Outside, Light and Jack are finally done with their training session, so they call it a day and head to the baths to relax. Jack tells Light he is getting really good at controlling his body, and there aren't many people down here who are strong enough to keep up with him anymore. The same probably goes for the people on the surface, but he reminds Light that he shouldn't let himself get too cocky, because they don't know what might be waiting for them on the surface. Light says he understands that he needs to be prepared, and he promises not to let his power go to his head so there will be no mistakes when the time comes for his revenge. Meanwhile, May has called the 4 fairy maids who gave Nazuna that message into her office, and she does not seem happy. She asks them if they know why she has summoned them here today, and they try to feign ignorance, but then May reads out their letter word for word, and she already got Nazuna to tell her that they were the ones who wrote the letter, so there's no way for them to weasel their way out of this mess. They all shuffle backwards and start apologizing for what they wrote, but they try to downplay their actions by saying they only did it out of concern for May. They say they know she's been busy lately, so they wanted to lighten her load by taking over the cleaning of Light's room for her, and maybe sniffing a pillow or two while they were at it. But that's not the point. May is also disappointed by the fact that they made Nazuna do their dirty work for them, since she might have considered it if they had the guts to deliver their message in person. She tells them that their request has been denied, and until further notice, they will be assigned to cleaning the entire corridor that leads to the throne room. And they aren't allowed to use any magic to speed up the process either. The maids can't believe May would give them such an impossible task because it'd take forever to clean that huge corridor by hand, but May doesn't think it'd be that hard. If anything, she says she's doing them a favor since level 500s like them need to put in a lot of hard work if they ever hope to reach her level. Additionally, May informs them that she is heading to the surface soon on a mission for Light, so the 4 of them are going to have to pick up the slack while she's gone. Later on, the 4 maids gather in their room, and they are really upset by the fact that May is punishing them for making a simple complaint. They don't think it's fair that she's the only one who gets to bask in Light's scent, but May is the strongest of them all, so there's no way they can stand up to her. Prime suggests that they could try poisoning her, but Hifuma already looked into that, and May is immune to all forms of poison, so there's no way it'd work. They all resign themselves to defeat and start groaning about how much they want to clean Light's room and sniff his bed. Hifumi takes it a step further and says she wants to use one of Light's used forks, but hearing her say that out loud makes it sound weird, so the others all call her a degenerate and say she's taking it too far. Hifumi defends herself and says everyone here would probably do the same thing if they got the opportunity, and they can't deny it, so they really are just as bad as Hifumi. Now that they think about it, May isn't much better than they are either, since she was all up in Light's bed earlier today, and the fact that she was the first one Light summoned means that for who knows how long she and Light were alone in the dungeon together. And at the time, Light's level was so low that he wouldn't have been able to defend himself from any monsters, so he was probably clinging to May the entire time. They'd all go mad with jealousy at the thought that May might have done indecent things with Light at some point, and Hifumi comes up with the bright idea of turning their jealous energy into a curse, so they all sit at the table and begin chanting over and over for May to die. Unfortunately for them, May has been standing outside their door this entire time, and she could hear every word they just said about her, so she asks them if they have anything to say for themselves. The 4 cower behind the table and begin telling May that they would never actually wish for anything bad to happen to her, but May clearly heard them praying for her death, so she asks what that was about. The group eventually admits that they were just jealous because May was summoned first and got to spend a lot of alone time with Light because of it, but May tells them that nothing indecent happened between her and Light. It took around 3 months for Light to summon Oyuki, and in that time May was busy teaching him about martial arts and world history, so no debauchery took place. The girls are relieved to hear that, but then May continues speaking and tells them that she had originally come here to apologize for giving them such a harsh punishment earlier, but after what they just did, she thinks she may need to be even harsher than before. She tells them that they will now be required to clean the entire throne room in addition to the corridor. The 3 kneel at May's feet and beg her to reconsider because there's no way they'd be able to clean the giant throne room by themselves, but May tells them they shouldn't have thought of that before they decided to prey on her downfall. They are forced to get to work immediately, and at this rate, they might have to work through the night to get it all done. But while Hifumi was dusting off the throne, the wing of the broken fixture falls off, and they all go silent as they realize just how screwed they are. All the while, Nazuna is lying in her bed without a care in the world. The next morning, Light heads outside and meets Oyuki, Nazuna, and Ellie out by the front gate. Nazuna is particularly excited to see Light since she didn't get to talk to him at all yesterday. Light wants to go straight to the point, but just then a rockhound appears out of nowhere, and even though Light is strong enough that it isn't a threat to him, he still begins trembling with fear a little because he remembers the day he nearly died to one of these. The others are enraged that a mere hound would dare to frighten their lord, so they start discussing plans to wipe its kind from existence. The hound didn't even do anything yet, but it can tell that one wrong move would spell its doom, so it lies down on the floor and starts whimpering for its life. Light tells the others that there's no need to get so upset because he's fine, and he even goes over to pet the hound to show them that it doesn't bother him. He apologizes to the hound for scaring it so much, and if he hadn't stepped in, they'd have actually wiped out its entire species without hesitation. They ask Light if there's a reason he told them to meet him out here, and he says May told him everything is ready for the mission, so they can finally head out to exact his revenge. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, Garou is walking through a Beastman town, and as the Beast hero, everyone here is fawning over him. In fact, this one dude in the back even offers to pimp out his own sister, but Garou isn't interested right now. Just then, he spots a poor human sifting through the trash for something to eat, and this kid was nowhere near Garou, but he decides to take a detour just so he can knock the child to the ground and spit on his face for fun. Afterwards, Garou and his team of lackeys head to a private room so they can begin glazing him. Figuratively, of course. They tell him they think it's amazing that he went from a poor beast slum child to the frontrunner to become the next chief. Even the current village chief has acknowledged his power, so they ask him how he managed to get this far. Garou brags that he just uses his instincts to pick out the best jobs for himself, like that one he took 3 years ago. He got paid a lot to pretend to be part of a race unification party, and all he had to do was finish off a human who was suspected of being a master. He never actually confirmed whether Light was dead or not, but with how weak he was, there's no way he could have survived down there on his own, so he thinks it'd be best to just forget about the brat. However, a moment later, May walks into the room asking about Light. Garou's lackeys yell that she has no right to speak to him like that, but Garou says it's fine because he would like to hear what business she has with him. May explains that she's a maid serving Lord Light, and she makes up a story claiming that Light is of noble blood and she has been searching all over the continent for him. Garou is skeptical since the people who hired him for that mission did a thorough background check on Light, and Light himself never mentioned anything about being a noble, but May definitely looks like a rich noble's maid, so he sees this as a good opportunity to make some cash. He asks her what she wants with him, so May says that she recently discovered that Light supposedly passed away in the dungeon 3 years ago, so she would like Garou to lead her to his last known location so she can pay her respects. She even offers to pay him in solid gold for the trouble, but Garou's senses are warning him that this whole thing is a trap. It seems way too fishy that she's willing to pay so much just for them to lead her into the dungeon, but since May looks like an ordinary human female, Garou brushes off his concerns because there's no way a human would be able to beat him. He agrees to lead her to Light's last known location, but he says he's not doing this for the money, he's doing this because Light was a good friend of his, and he wants to help out in any way he can. May knows that everything he just said is complete BS, but she has to stay in character, so she thanks him, and a month later, the group is closing in on the spotlight went missing. However, Garou has no intention of actually fulfilling the terms of the agreement, so as soon as they get there, he plans to attack May and let her die the same way Light did. Once they arrive at the spot, May falls to her knees in despair at the thought of how hopeless Light must have felt back then. Meanwhile, Garou tries to spin a story about Light getting attacked by a monster and falling into a teleportation trap before anyone could save him. But as he is speaking, several of his men begin blocking off the exit so May won't be able to escape once they attack. They are just about to pounce on her. But May suddenly says that if only she had been with Light from the start, then he wouldn't have been tricked and betrayed by such lowlives. As soon as he hears her say that, Garou panics and backs away because no one aside from the other Concord party members and the higher-ups know about what really happened here. He demands to know how she found out about that and accuses her of being a spy from one of the other races, but May feels insulted by that statement. She is and will always be a maid dedicated to serving Lord Light with all her being, and for Garou to suggest that she's anything is a crime punishable by death. Garou feels a terrifying pressure coming from May, and even though she's just a human, his instincts are telling him to get the hell out of here right now. However, just as May was able to lose her cool and plaster the wall with Beastman blood, Light shows up and tells her to stop because Garou is his prey to deal with. Garou and his men were stunned. None of them had heard Light approaching. Garou couldn't believe his eyes. He hadn't even considered the possibility that Light could have survived. Light Casual says he is back to get his revenge, but Garou begins to laugh because he thinks it's hilarious that a level 15 human like Light thinks he is strong enough to get revenge on someone like him who is level 150. Garou has no idea how Light managed to make it this far, but he's sure that if he kills Light and brings him back now, then he will be promoted to chief in no time. Light sighs and asks him if he's really not going to ask him how he managed to survive before resorting to violence, but Garou just assumes Light got lucky and was saved by May after he was teleported, which is actually exactly what happened. Garou orders his men to attack Light, so two immediately charge forward to strike, but before they could get too close, their heads are suddenly divorced from their bodies by May. Garou's remaining men couldn't even keep track of May's movements, so they are starting to freak out. but Garou tells them to calm down because he's sure that was just a fluke. Meanwhile, Light thanks May for taking the initiative to protect him, but he says he can handle things on his own from here, so he just wants her to guard the exit and make sure no one leaves. Garou tells his men there's no need to worry because they can't possibly lose to a pair of inferior humans, but Light is starting to get sick of listening to Garou go on and on about how he is so much better than humans when in reality, he is the weak one here. Garou doesn't believe that for even 1 second, because it is well known that all humans are weak and have little mana compared to the other races, so they could never be weaker than Light. If that's what he truly believes, then Light asks him why 2 of his men have their heads rolling on the floor if they are all stronger than him, but Garou just dismisses that as a careless mistake. He and his goons then proceed to jump at Light, so he calmly closes his eyes and proceeds to dog-walk them while barely lifting a finger. Garou falls to the ground wide-eyed because he just got hit harder than ever before, and he couldn't even see it coming. Light stands over his body and asks him if this is really the best he and his so-called superior race can accomplish, but Garou can't stand the fact that Light is looking down on him, so he decides to use his trump card and smashes a necklace to the ground, summoning a level 500 Fenrir to take care of Light for him. He proudly yells that this is the end of the road for Light, but Light tells him that level 500 is still way too weak to be a challenge for him. Garou thinks Light must have gone insane from fear. There's no way he could possibly defeat a Fenrir on his own. He tells him to get down on his knees and beg if he wants a painless death. Light can see that the power difference here hasn't sunk in yet, so he sets his staff aside and tells Garou he won't move from this spot, so he is free to hit him with his best attack. Garou is still convinced that Light must be bluffing, so he charges up his Fenrir's Howling Beast Blast and hits Light with enough energy to vaporize a small fortress. However, when the dust settles, Light is still standing, unharmed and unmoved. He thinks it's a little embarrassing that Garou was bragging so much about an attack that barely did anything. He also thinks it's weird that Garou keeps calling his summon a Fenrir when it's barely strong enough to be classified as a Fenrir puppy. He then pulls out a summon card and says he will show Garou what a real Fenrir looks like right before summoning a wolf god. This is a level 9000 Fenrir that goes beyond anything Garou has ever seen in his life, and after Light orders it to take care of Garou's summon, it literally just blows some air in the direction of Garou's wolf, and it is suddenly frozen in a block of ice. Seeing Light casually pull out a wolf that was able to no-diff his summon finally makes Garou realize how screwed he is, but Light tells him the wolf god was just for show, because he could have taken care of Garou's summon on his own if he had wanted. And to make the difference in strength absolutely clear, Light enables his status screen to show Garou that he is currently level 9,999. He is absolutely terrified now because he didn't even know levels could go up that high, and he is starting to think that Light is an imposter. But it's not like it matters whether this is the real Light or not, since he's definitely going to kill Garou with how things are going. He throws down his weapons and his pride and begins begging Light to spare his life. He says he was just following his country's orders and he never would have betrayed him otherwise. He looks up, hoping that Light will have mercy on him. But before any of that, Light says he has a few questions for Garou. First, he asks him about the masters that his higher-ups asked him to find, but Garou says he doesn't actually know what they are. Light then asks him why those same higher-ups ordered Garou and the others to kill him after confirming that Light wasn't a master, but Garou really doesn't have any information. He just did as he was told. Light then asks the rest of the beast men if they know anything about the masters, and they all lie that they do in hopes of getting Light to spare them. But in the next moment, May slices them all to bits for daring to state falsehoods in front of Lord Light. Light then turns back to Garou and says he has one final question to ask, but in case he was thinking about lying, he should know that May's eye of judgment can tell whether he is being honest or not, and he won't like what happens if she finds out he is lying. Since Garou's intuition is so sharp, Light asks him if he thinks it would be possible to win a war against the surface nations as he is now. Garou gulps in hesitation, but he eventually tells Light that his incredible strength would certainly give him an advantage early on in the battle, but he would eventually lose. He is still only one person, so winning an entire war against nations that have countless soldiers, weapons, and items at their disposal would be practically impossible. Garou thinks Light will be upset by the answer he just gave, but Light can tell that Garou was telling the truth and he already expected as much. However, he says there's something he wants to show Garou, so he pulls out a teleport card and transports both Garou and May to the throne room. Garou covers his head in fear because he doesn't know what Light has planned for him, but when he opens his eyes, he is left speechless as he sees Light's army in all their glory. Light walks up to his throne, and once he is there, he asks all of his subordinates to display their levels so Garou can see how powerful they truly are. To Garou's horror, he finds out that most of Light's army is above level 5,000, and even the weakest ones are still level 1,500. Now that Garou has seen his true military power, Light asks him if it would be possible to win a war against the surface with an army like this, and the look on his face tells Light all he needs to know. Now that he has confirmed that he can win as a reward, Light says he will forgive Garou for all the pain he caused back then. Psych, Light says he is going to put Garou through constant suffering that will make him beg for death, and Garou knows there is nothing he can do about it, because at this point, Light might as well be a god of destruction. The next day, Light returned to his hometown to find his family and bring them to his dungeon city, but unfortunately, by the time they arrived, all he found waiting for him was a pile of rubble and decaying flesh. Apparently, the village had been destroyed roughly 6 months ago by some unknown forces and no one was spared. Light searches the village for corpses so he can hold a proper funeral for them. And to his relief, he doesn't find any bodies belonging to his siblings, so he believes they must still be alive out there somewhere. However, his parents weren't so lucky. Gold asks Light if he is alright since this must be very difficult for him to process, but he says he will be fine. For now, they need to focus on the mission at hand, so he asks Gold and Nemumu to help gather as much information as possible. While they may now know that their military is strong enough to contend with the world's forces, it would be foolish to march into war right away, so he wants to find out more details regarding the strength of each nation. Additionally, he is fairly certain that the destruction of his hometown had something to do with the fact that he was suspected to be a master, so he wants to find out what a master is and why it is worth shedding so much blood over. If he finds out that this is just a case of some wealthy bastards getting greedy for power, then he swears that he will burn the world to ash and then force-feed the cinders to the people behind all this. Gold understands why Light is so angry, but he warns him to keep his rage in check once they are around other people, because the energy he is releasing could kill a regular person instantly. Light apologizes for the slip-up and pulls out an item called the Fool's Mask to suppress his energy and hide his identity. He then says goodbye to the graves of his mom and dad and apologizes for not being able to save them. He, Nemumu, and Gold then begin flying towards the city of Dagas, but Nemumu is curious since she doesn't know what Light plans to do once they arrive. Just then, Gold tells Nemumu that she should be careful about how she addresses their lord while they are on the surface, and Light explains to her that referring to him by his real name would tip off the people behind Concord, so instead he plans to go by the name Dark while they are on the mission. Nemumu says she understands, and as for what Light plans to do in Dagas, he tells her that he is going to register himself as an adventurer under the name Dark, and as he rises through the ranks, he will be able to gather more and more information from the guild Big Shots. After a little while, Nemumu spots the city of Dagas over the horizon, and they wouldn't want to draw too much attention by flying in, so Light suggests they should land in the forest and walk the rest of the way. Although with Gold's magnificent armor, they are going to stand out either way. As the three are walking through the forest, they come upon a scene of a human tradesman being robbed by a bunch of dwarves, and while they would have preferred to stay out of sight until they got to the city, Gold's armor comes with inbuilt sparkle animations, so the bandits immediately notice him. They then try robbing him as well, but that doesn't go so well for them, and the dwarves are all left tied up in the middle of the road. The two humans are extremely thankful that they have been saved, so they offer to give Light and the others a ride into the city as a gesture of gratitude. Along the way, the man's son talks about how amazing Gold was since he had never seen someone take out dwarves so easily before. The man assumes they must be a famous group of adventurers, but Light tells him they actually aren't even registered yet. The man is shocked to hear this, but he tells them that if they really want to register as adventurers, then Dagas is the right place to go since it has one of the biggest guilds around, and it's right near the border between the elf, dwarf, and human kingdoms. There are a fair number of humans who gather here, so it is one of the more accommodating cities for humanity. He was even able to open up a fairly successful human hotel there, and he invites Light and the others to stay there if they need a place to stay. A little while later, they arrive at Dagas, and Light and the others ask Colonel to drop them off by the city entrance since they want to walk the rest of the way. For Gold and Nemumu, this is their first time actually seeing a surface city, and they notice that there are a lot of shops around that sell armor and weapons, but Light tells them that's just because there are a lot of adventurers here. Not to mention that the Dwarf Kingdom is close by, and those guys specialize in blacksmithing, so of course they'd sell their wares here. Once the group arrives at the guild, Nemumu notices that all the humans seem to scatter whenever someone from a different race walks by, and Light takes that as a sign that humans are treated poorly in this city as well, even if it isn't immediately obvious. He heads to the front desk to register, and as usual, he's required to start out at F rank, so Light is going to have to do a few quests to raise his rank later. But before that, they need to find a place to stay, and Light recalls Colonel mentioning that he owns a hotel, so he and the others decide to head there. Colonel is surprised to see Light again and asks what he can do for him, so Light says he has a special request to make. He tells Colonel that he would like to rent out the entire top floor of this building, and under no circumstances should anyone, even Colonel's staff, be allowed to enter. As payment, he plops a bag full of gold coins down on the table, and Colonel is left speechless because he doesn't know what to say. Light says he can pay more money if this isn't enough, but Colonel tells him this is already 10 times more than enough. He says he can't accept this kind of money from the man who saved his life earlier, but Light insists, so Colonel eventually accepts the generous offer and says he will get the rooms ready as soon as possible. A little while later, Light and the others head upstairs and he takes out a few perception-blocking spell cards and casts them on the room to ensure that no one will be able to eavesdrop. He can finally relax without having to worry about someone spying on him, so he pulls up a chair and takes a seat so he can rest. While Light is seated, Nemumu speaks up and tells him that while she is aware that he is very powerful, and that he chose to become an adventurer here to gather information, there is always a risk that he might get hurt on the surface, so she thinks it would be safer if Light returned to the dungeon city and let them handle things here on their own. Light is a nice person, but what Nemumu just suggested is basically trying to sideline him in his own revenge plot, and that pisses him off to the extreme because she's essentially saying she thinks he's too incompetent to pull it off. Nemumu immediately realizes that she screwed up, so she begs Light to forgive her insolence, but it's too late for that. He looks like he might actually kill Nemumu for what she said, and Gold can tell that things are getting really tense, so he laughs and tells Light that Nemumu simply doesn't understand the appeal of revenge. He tells her that Light wants to exact his vengeance with his own two hands without any middleman, and that's a noble cause to work towards. Hearing Gold's lighthearted banter makes Light realize that he may have gone too far, so he gets down and apologizes to Nemumu for letting his emotions get the better of him since he knows she only said that out of concern for his safety. But Nemumu acknowledges that this was her fault for stepping out of line with her comments, so she begs him to allow her to pledge her allegiance to him once more. Light really doesn't think that's necessary, but he agrees to let her do it anyway, so Nemumu gently lifts his foot and kisses it. In this world, a kiss to the foot is the greatest show of respect one can show towards a leader, but Light has never really been a fan of this custom, especially with how awkward it was to have all his subordinates kiss his feet one after the other when he first summoned them. Even Gold acknowledges that it's kind of weird, especially since Nemumu looks like she's enjoying it way too much. The next morning, Light and the others head for the dungeon, and as they are walking through town, a lot of people start to stare because Gold has more bling than a SoundCloud rapper, and Nemumu looks really pretty. Although the only thing they have to say about Light is that he looks weird in that mask, but that does fit his dark persona, so it doesn't bother him. There's a long line of people waiting to get into the dungeon, but Gold notices that there don't seem to be any elves here at all. Light tells him that's because the elves and the dwarves are currently in a dispute over who owns this dungeon, so they tend to avoid each other. Nemumu praises Light for always having the perfect answer to any question, and he appreciates the compliment, but he asks her if she really needs to stand so close all the time because her chest is squishing up against the back of his head. She tells him it's her job to keep him safe at all times, so she needs to be as close as possible, and before Light can argue, he notices 3 people cut in front of the line. The little one is most likely a servant, and the second one seems like someone with moderate training, but as for the guy in front, Light can tell that he carries all of his movements are sharp and precise, even with the bulky weapon on his back. He is without a doubt a seasoned fighter, and a few of the other humans are too scared to confront him, since they probably get cut down for speaking. However, Light doesn't have to worry about that, so he confronts the elf and tells him it's rude to cut in line like that. The elf becomes enraged when he realizes a human is daring to speak to him, so he reaches for his sword, but the elder he's with tells him it's not worth causing a commotion or something like this, so the warrior agrees to go to the back of the line. However, as he walks past Light, he warns him that he will make sure he regrets disrespecting him like that. Once the elf is gone, the rest of the humans in line praise Light for standing up to that bully, and the kids from earlier come over to personally thank him since they couldn't work up the courage to do so. Light tells them there's no need to thank him since he was only doing it out of self-interest, but they are still thankful. Just then, one of the kids speaks up and asks Gold if his armor is really made out of gold since everyone here is curious, but before Gold can say anything, Nemumu tells them that none of Gold's armor is actually made of gold, otherwise it'd be too weak to offer any protection. The kid is then about to ask if Gold is just wearing it for attention then, but his friends stop him because it'd be a rude question to ask. However, Gold explains that he really does just wear it for attention, since there's no better color to represent the shining example he sets as a knight. The kids ask Light and the others if this is their first time heading into the dungeon, and Light confirms this, but he asks them how they knew. The kids explain that this floor is quite expansive, so adventurers often have to camp inside, but Light's party didn't bring any camping gear with them, so he figured they must have never been inside before. Just then, the guard calls for the next party to head inside, so the kids say goodbye and run into the dungeon together. Meanwhile, Light and the others are wondering if they should start carrying fake luggage around, since even though they have everything they need stored in an item box, they wouldn't want people mistaking them for noobs. A little while later, it's their turn to enter the dungeon, and this is Light's first time entering one aside from the abyss. Dungeons are filled with mana that gets stronger the deeper you go, and it often leads to the creation of things like monsters and traps, so the inside of a dungeon is practically its own world. Once they arrive on the first floor, Light casts concealment magic on all of them so enemies can't track them down, and they all start flying towards the second floor. Meanwhile, that elf from before is busy taking his anger out on a bunch of orcs because he can't believe a human would dare to speak to him in such a manner. His name is Keto, and he says he is a legendary hero from the elf kingdom with the blood of a master flowing through his veins, so he deserves respect. He says that would never have happened if his level wasn't so low, but Yenny tells him that a level of 1,500 is already way higher than the usual level cap for elves, but Keto says it's not enough because he needs enough power to obliterate all the fools who mocked him. Yenny tells him he sympathizes because he also wants to get revenge on the idiots who refused to acknowledge his research and exiled him, so he would be more than happy to use that research to help Keto level up even further. Meanwhile, Light and the others have already made it down to the third floor, and they just finished dealing with a large horde of orcs. Light suggests they should start heading back now since they've gotten enough proof for the guild already, and that fight left him pretty dirty, so he wants to take a bath. As soon as Nemu hears that, she offers to wash every inch of Light's body for him once they get back, but he doesn't respond. On the way back, Light and the others run into the kids from earlier, so they head down to meet up with them, but all of a sudden they hear a lot of noise coming from the forest and dozens of wolves come running out. The kids tell Light they need to retreat since they won't be able to fight the wolves, but Light tells them the wolves aren't what they need to worry about because there's an even bigger threat heading their way, a giant quad-scythe mantis. The kids can't believe what they are seeing since the mantis monster species was supposedly exterminated 10 years ago, and there's no way they can handle one on their own. The leader asks Mia to try hitting the mantis with some magic as a distraction, but he knows that won't be enough, so he desperately turns Light and the others and asks them to help disorient the monster so they can all escape together. However, after hearing that the kids plan on retreating, Light asks if that means they won't mind if he takes it for himself. The kids think he's crazy because a mantis like that has got to be at least level 500, but Light tells them there's no need to worry because he and his friends are more than capable of dealing with it. Gold steps up to take the first swing at it, and to his surprise, the mantis is actually able to block a bunch of his strikes without suffering much damage, so its claws must be sturdier than he thought. Light decides to go up next and launches a fire arrow straight at the mantis, but before it could connect, the mantis parried it and sent it right back at Light. As the kids watch this, they think Light and the others are in trouble, so they ask Mia to hurry up with her attack magic, but she's way too excited about what Light just did to focus. He just used combat-grade magic without having to use an incantation, and she didn't even know that was possible. The others don't know much about magic, so they can't tell what counts as impressive or not, but they Light and his friends. However, Gold tells them they are better off sitting this one out, and as an added bonus, he says he will give them a little lesson about what it means to be a knight. For one, he tells them that a shield doesn't need to be limited to just defense, and as the mantis attacks him, he turns around and perfectly parries its attack, shattering the mantis's claw in the process. He then tells them that a knight must never miss an opportunity to strike. So while the mantis is still reeling from the pain of losing its claw, Gold rushes behind it and chops off one of its legs. Light then comes in with more fire arrows, but this time as the mantis deflects them, the arrows simply change trajectory and fly into its back. Light has taken control of the arrows, so now, no matter what the mantis does, they will always hit their mark. All of the mantis' limbs are eventually blown off, and it realizes it stands no chance at defeating Light, so it books it back towards the forest, and Light is surprised that it is smart enough to decide to retreat. But he's not going to let it escape after all this. He casts a firewall in front of the mantis to stop it from getting to the forest, and Mia is absolutely losing her mind because she has never seen anyone use such widespread tactical magic instantly like that. There's nowhere left for the mantis to run, but it's still got its wings, so it takes off into the sky as a final escape attempt. However, before it could flee, Nembumu leaped up after it and diced it to pieces midair. After she returns to the ground, Gold tells her that she messed up, and this gets under her skin because she thought she was doing exactly what Light wanted by destroying the mantis, but Gold points out that she also destroyed all the valuable parts, so now there's no way for them to sell any of it when they get back to town. Nembumu soon realizes she really did mess up, so she immediately starts begging Light for forgiveness, but he says it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, the kids are all standing off to the side, wondering whether they really just saw a human defeat a quad-scythe mantis or if they hallucinated the entire thing. A few minutes later, while sifting through all the mantis goo, the kids happen to find its magic gem, and by sheer luck, it's still in one piece, so Light will be able to submit it as proof of his accomplishment. But before he leaves, One of the kids approaches him and asks if he is from a famous party of adventurers or something because he seems way too strong to be a newbie. However, Light informs them that they are all indeed F-rankers, and the kids don't know what to believe anymore. Now that the fight is over, Mia uses her magic to create a water ball and offers to let Light use it to wash the mantis goo off himself. Light is grateful that she would use her precious mana to allow him to wash himself, but she says this is the least she could do. Since it's getting late, the leader asks Light and the others if they would like to camp out with them for the night. Partially because it's dangerous to roam around once it gets dark, but also due to the fact that Mia really wants to talk about magic with Light. And since there's no harm in it, Light agrees to stay. While the group is eating, Mia asks Light all sorts of questions about his past, but he can't exactly reveal his plans to her. So he makes up a fake backstory and says both of his parents were powerful mages, which is why he is so good at casting magic without incantations. That makes sense to Mia, but her brother says he still doesn't understand why it's so impressive. After hearing him say that, she goes on a long rant about how incredible Light's magic was. There are 3 main classes of magic, namely the combat class, magic that can be used on a single target, tactical class, magic that affects a wide area, like the firewall Light used before. And finally, there's strategic magic, which has the potential to affect the world on a global scale. It includes things like creating earthquakes or meteorite strikes, but it usually requires a group of elite mages pooling their mana together and reciting incantations to pull that off. For the other races, casting advanced spells is easy, but humans, on the other hand, are rarely able to achieve such a thing. That's why she was so amazed that a human like Light could pull off such a feat. Mia's brother still doesn't understand much about magic, but from what Mia has said, he can tell that Light must be truly incredible. However, he tells Mia to give herself some credit as well since her magic was good enough to earn her a referral to the Magic Academy from the Duchy. This gets Light's attention, so he asks if they are referring to the one in charge of the nation formed jointly by all 9 races, the Principality of 9. Mia confirms this, and Gold acknowledges that she must be a talented mage to have been recognized by the Principality. Mia's brother agrees, but unfortunately, both of their parents passed away from a plague, so she couldn't afford to attend the academy, and they were forced to create an adventuring party with 2 of their childhood friends, Jimra and Wordy, just so they could get by. Right now, their goal is to earn enough money from exploring dungeons to send Mia to the academy, but Mia says she's happy just getting to spend time with them, so they don't need to push themselves too far for her sake. Her brother assures her that he won't do anything reckless, and seeing Mia and her brother talk like this reminds Light a lot of the time he used to spend with his little sister. Just then, Mia and her brother ask Light why he decided to become an adventurer, so he makes up a story and tells them his parents died in a fire, and he was left with severe burns, so he is searching for a magic potion to heal himself. That sounds really rough, so no one knows what to say anymore, and Jimra doesn't like all the tension, so he gets up and asks if Gold and Nemumu are dating. Nemumu immediately becomes defensive and says she would never date someone like Gold, and Gold is much calmer about it. But he says he has no interest in a woman as immature as Nemumu. While those two are arguing, elsewhere in the dungeon, Kido is busy cutting down orcs to get Yannick the research samples he needs for his experiment to surpass the level caps imposed on each race. And now that he has enough magic material ready, he says all he needs is a human guinea pig, and Kido knows exactly who he wants to hunt down for the experiment. Some time goes by and Light heads to the guild to exchange his latest haul of magic stones. A large crowd forms around him because they've never seen someone return with so many magic gems. After Light and the others defeated the Mantis, they earned quite the name for themselves in the city, and people now call their party Black Motley. The receptionists have started treating them a lot better lately, and Light is happy to be receiving all this attention since it was his goal from the beginning. As he and the others are walking towards the dungeon, he is suddenly called out to by a man on the road, and Nemumu immediately becomes defensive, but the guy says he isn't looking to cause any trouble. He says his name is Sullivan, and his buddy over here is Gilbert. They heard that Light and his party were able to defeat a quad-sized mantis and made it all the way down to the 5th door, so when he saw him walking by, he just had to talk to him. Just then, the rest of Gilbert and Sullivan's party tells them it's time to head into the dungeon, so they say goodbye to Light and head inside. Light thinks it's nice that he is giving hope to the other humans in town, but there is no shortage of other races who are envious of Light's power and believe he is a fraud. He kind of expected them to refuse to accept his accomplishments, but he's just going to have to force them to acknowledge him by showing undeniable results. Once he enters the dungeon, he tells Gold and Nemumu that he plans to head back down to the 5th floor today, but before that, he happens to spot the kids from before, so he decides to head down to say hello. Mia and the others are surprised to see Light since it has been a while since they last ran into each other, but Mia's brother says this is perfect timing since there's something Mia has been wanting to give him. Mia is a little nervous about it at first, but she hands Light a little clamshell with some ointment she made herself. She remembers him mentioning that he has severe burns all over his body, so she made it to help relieve the pain a little. Light is really grateful for the kind gesture, though it does make him feel a little bad for lying to her about having burns. To make up for it, he decides to return the favor and pulls out one of his items as a gift from Mia. It's a bracelet, and it looks really nice, so Mia isn't sure she should be accepting something that's so valuable. Light tells her that her gift really warmed his heart, so he wants her to have it as his way of returning the favor. She happily accepts the gift and tells Light she will treasure it forever, but after Light and the others depart, Nimumu asks him if he's sure it was wise to give her an SS-class item so casually. That bracelet was a wishing bracelet, and depending on the will of the weather, it can make a small miracle come true, so Light figured it would be a great gift for someone like Mia. A little while later, they arrive on the 5th floor, and it is absolutely covered in snow. This works out in their favor since the snow will act as great cover, so Light tells Gold and Nemumu that they are in charge of hunting Yenis while he's gone, and then he activates a teleportation item, sending him back to his throne room in the dungeon city. There he has a nice cup of tea and asks his team how the revenge operations are coming along. Ellie tells him that she has almost gotten everything ready, so they will be able to move on to the next phase before much longer. Light is happy to hear that, so he tells Ellie she is free to use whatever resources she needs to make sure things progress smoothly, and in the meantime, he would like Mei to continue managing affairs here in the Abyss and Akuki to continue scouting. Just then, Mizuna asks him if there's anything he wants her to do in the meantime, and Light doesn't really know what to say because Mizuna is pretty useless when it comes to anything other than defeating monsters, but he also doesn't want to make her feel left out, so he says she is to remain on standby to protect the city in case a powerful bad guy shows up. That's good enough for her, so she swears that no one will get her on her watch, and Light can't wait for the day that his plan can go into action because he wants to savor the miserable look on Sasha's face when he confronts her. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the dungeon, Gilbert and Sullivan had set up camp and were keeping watch while their party members slept. At one point, Sullivan needed to go pee, so he stepped in the forest for a moment, but by the time he came back, he saw Gilbert's decapitated head lying on the ground with Keto standing over him. The other two were also killed in their sleep, and Keto makes it clear that he is doing this out of pure hatred for the human species as a whole. Sullivan is enraged by what Keto has done, but he is smart enough to know that he stands no chance against him. So he throws down a smoke bomb and starts running away so he can make it back to the guild to report what happened. He thinks he has a good shot of escaping since most magic is useless unless you know where your opponent is. However, he suddenly gets hit in the back with something, and as he looks up, he sees Keto riding on a magical hoverboard. He is then knocked out a moment later by Yannick, and he scolds Keto for killing all the humans since he was very specific about capturing them alive. Kaido doesn't see the problem since it shouldn't matter if he killed a few lowly humans, and it's not like Yannick actually cared about their lives either, but he needs as many test subjects as possible because his research is currently unstable and Sullivan is bound to die from side effects long before Yannick perfects it, so they need to find some more human guinea pigs. A little while later, up on the surface, Nemumu is arguing with the guild receptionist to try and get Light promoted, but while the receptionist is aware how strong Light is, they already made an exception to promote him from F to D rank recently, and not enough time has passed for them to consider another exception. However, she does tell him that if he accomplishes something extraordinary again, the guild would have no choice but to promote him, so Light decides to try it. After looking around for the day, he finds a flyer talking about an unknown adventurer killer, and tracking this killer down should be enough of an accomplishment, so he decides to hunt the killer down. However, he has no leads to go off of, so it is going to be difficult. Gold suggests he could use his Gacha ability to get a card that will help track the killer down, but Light tells him that the cards he gets are completely random, so the odds of him receiving a tracking card are really slim. In that case, Nemumu asks if they should return to the Abyss to get someone who has skills more suited for tracking, and that does sound like a good idea, but it would take too long and he doesn't want to waste too much time catching the killer. They seem to be targeting exclusively humans, and he doesn't want to let that go unpunished. Just then, the three feel a space rift open within the room, meaning something is about to show up, so they get into battle formation and wait to see what it is. However, to Light's surprise, when the portal opens, he sees Mia fall out of the portal unconscious, and after catching her, the miracle bracelet he gave her breaks in two. Light has no idea what happened to her, but he knows it must be bad, so he carries her to bed, and as he does so, he can hear her mumbling to herself about how she needs to hurry and inform him of something. He casts a healing spell on Mia to help her recover, but she's still in no condition to speak, so Light apologizes, but he's going to need to pry into her mind a little. He casts a powerful mind spell on her, and as he does so, he sees a flashback to Mia and the rest of her party meeting a second group of adventurers. The second group warned them to be careful, because there have been reports of an adventurer killer going around, and the guy apparently only targets humans. The kids had heard about it, but they were under the impression that it was just a rogue monster. However, now that they think about it, a monster wouldn't target humans specifically. After hearing this, Mia got worried because she knew their party wouldn't stand a chance if the killer attacked them, and the same goes for the other group of adventurers, which is why they plan to get out of here as soon as possible. Before the second party leaves, they tell the kids that they should probably leave the dungeon as well, since until the killer is caught, it won't be safe for humans down here. The kids took the warning seriously and decided to leave as soon as possible, but since they weren't expecting to have to make a sudden hike back to the surface, they are all really tired. Due to this, they weren't able to make it back before nightfall, but they couldn't afford to stop since they did know when the killer might strike again. And in a stroke of bad luck, a moment later they hear Yannick's voice telling them that it's dangerous to be out here this late at night. At this point, the kids have no idea that these two are behind the killings, so Mia suggests they should warn them. The group tells Yannick and Kido that there has been a string of killings happening down here, so it would be safer to return to the surface for now. Kaito and Yannick thank them for the valuable information, and at first the kids are relieved since they think that must mean they are just normal adventurers like them. But then Yannick starts talking about how he wishes he had put more effort into covering up his and Kido's attacks since the news spreading has caused all the human adventurers to wise up and avoid the dungeon. As soon as the kids hear him say that, their blood runs cold at the realization that the killers they were so worried about are the people who are right in front of them. And Kido seems to really be enjoying the look of pure terror on their faces. The kids are all terrified, but they know there's no way all of them will make it out of this even if they run, so the three boys takes out their weapons and tell Mia to flee while they buy her some time. Kaito feels insulted that lowly humans would think they stand a chance against him, so as Mia's brother charges forward, he slices him across the chest without a second thought. He does the same to the other two as well, and while they aren't dead yet, their wounds are so severe that they are practically knocking on death's door. Even so, they still force themselves back to their feet and yell for Mia to run away while they charge at Kito, and this infuriates Kido even more, so he decides to kill them outright. Yannick yells at him for this because he won't be able to use those two as guinea pigs now that they are dead. However, Kido tells him to shut up because there's no way he was going to let them live when they were so disrespectful to him, fighting for their lives and stuff. So Yannick should still be able to carry out his experiments. Yannick admits that a magician is especially valuable as a research subject, but he says those boys could have been just as valuable, so Kido promises not to kill any more guinea pigs from now on. But before Yannick begins experimenting with Mia, Kido plans to do some terrible things to her just for fun, and even Yannick doesn't want to be involved in that debauchery. So he just reminds Kido to make sure Mia doesn't die and turns away. Mia is terrified as Kido looms over her with nefarious intent, but before he could do anything, her brother suddenly gets back on his feet and yells for Mia to run. Yannick is amazed that he managed to cling on to life despite his severe wounds, and that's the kind of tenacity he needs in a test subject. So he tells Kaito to make sure he captures the boy alive at all costs. His body is on the verge of giving out, but that doesn't matter to him right now because the only thing on his mind right now is making sure that Mia gets out of here. He tells her again to run away, and as much as she doesn't want to leave her brother behind, she knows this is the only chance she will get since Kaito is currently distracted, so she turns and starts running. As soon as Kaito realizes she is escaping, he prepares to chase after her, but Elio attempts to strike him, and while he had no hope of actually injuring Kaito, it's enough of a distraction to buy Mia a few more seconds to escape. Kaito really wants to just kill Mia's brother and get this over with, but Yannick reminds him that he needs the boy alive so he can't cause any fatal wounds. Meanwhile, Elio has been muttering to himself, trying to figure out a way to buy as much time for Mia to escape as possible, and he thinks back to the lesson he learned from Gold when they first met. Gold said that it is normal to assume that a sword is for attacking and that a shield is for defending, but battle is about creativity and skill, so you need to be able to surprise your opponent if you want to win. Elio puts that lesson into practice here and throws his sword at Kaito. Kaito assumes this must be his attack, so he leans back to dodge the blade, but while he wasn't paying attention, Elio closed the distance and clocked him in the jaw with his shield, knocking Kaito over. That's the best Elio could do, but he is really proud of himself because even if he is going to die here, at least he managed to land a clean blow on Kaito. Kaito can't believe a lowly human was actually able to land a hit on him, and he feels so humiliated and enraged that he completely disregards Yannick's request to keep Elio alive and uses his sword to shoot a light spear straight through his abdomen. He somehow didn't die instantly from the attack, and Kaito plans to make him suffer as much as possible for daring to strike his majestic face, but Yannick stops him and says he needs to go after Mia immediately because if she manages to escape, things will get complicated once the guild finds out about what they've been doing here. Kaito is still angry, but he understands Yannick's point, so he turns around and starts chasing after Mia. Mia has been running as fast as she can for a while now, but before she could make it to the exit, Kaito blocked her path with 3 light blades. Mia is in disbelief because she didn't think he would be able to catch up so quickly, but Kido possesses the Elf Nation's Phantasm class weapon, the legendary sword Grandius, and it allows him to create as many blades of light as he wants and move them around at will. He tells her there's no use running since with his blades. Catching up to her is a trivial task, but Mia still refuses to give up. She casts a spell and launches a few icicles at Kido to break his line of sight so she can escape into the forest, but after running for a few more minutes, Kido finds her again and knocks her to the ground. He tells her she should be grateful that she will be sacrificed for the benefit of a future legendary hero like him, but Mia yells that he doesn't deserve to be called that. The title of legendary hero is reserved for people who are both strong and kind like Light, but Kido, on the other hand, is nothing but a loser who enjoys bullying those weaker than him. Hearing that strikes a nerve for Kido as he recalls how the other elves all mocked him for being a good-for-nothing bully who was only willing to pick on the weak. It was part of the reason he was banished from elf society in the first place, but he refuses to accept that he is the problem and instead blames everyone else around him for not recognizing how great he is. He loses his mind in anger and forgets all about keeping Mia alive, so he is about to strike her down, and Mia can tell that there's no escaping this attack, but she still refused to give up and was desperately trying to think of a way to get to Light so she can ask for help, and that's when the bracelet kicked in. Back to the present, after learning of everything Mia and the others went through, Light is beside himself with anger, so he tells Gold and Nemumu to get ready to head out, because he's about to crash out on those elves. Back in the dungeon, Yannick is trying to heal Elio's wounds, but from the state his body is in, it looks like it's already too late to save him, and he is really upset about losing such a valuable specimen. Just then, Kido returns and Yanni asks him if he managed to capture the girl, but he says he lost track of her, and as soon as Yanni hears that, he starts panicking. He asks how Kido could let himself be bested by a little girl, but Kido says it wasn't his fault because how was he supposed to know that she would just vanish into thin air like that? Yanni can't believe it since there's no way a human child like her would have a teleportation item on her, but that's definitely what happened, so he needs to face the facts. And the facts say the two of them are screwed. If Mia reports what happened to the guild, it will only be a matter of time before word reaches the Elf Nation, and as soon as they figure out where Kido is, they are going to come after him for stealing the Grandius sword. To make matters worse, the Elf Nation will almost certainly send the head knight after them as well, and he is said to be around level 3000, with all of his personal knights under him being at least level 2000. In other words, Kido and Yannick by extension are cooked. Their only shot at surviving now would be to try out Yannick's research in order to make Kido strong enough to face off against the Elven Knights, but before they could leave to do so, Light suddenly shows up, and he tells them they won't be going anywhere. Kaido recognizes Light as the guy who called him out for skipping the line when he first came into the dungeon, but he doesn't understand how a human could possibly sneak up on him like this when he's 1,500. Light is saddened to see Jimra and Wardy lying lifeless on the ground, and it is already too late to save them, so he closes their eyes and apologizes for not getting here sooner. Gold then grabs Ilio's body, and he seems to have some life left in him, so Light might still be able to save him. He casts healing magic on Elio and then turns back to ask Kido why he would do something like this. Scratch that, he doesn't care what self-centered reason they may have because they made his friends suffer, and he swears on his name that he will make them suffer pain so unbearable that they will beg for the sweet release of death. Light asks Nemumu and Gold to stay out of this because he wants to handle it on his own, and Kido is offended that Light seems to think he can defeat him alone. He is sick of insignificant humans defying him all the time even though he is vastly superior, so he says he will take his sweet time torturing Light before killing him. But after launching his first strike, Light is easily able to stop it with his staff, and he is a little disappointed in Kido because he was expecting more power from him. He loses his shit after Light nearly knocks him out with his staff and decides to use his sword's full power to take him out, but despite dozens of blades close being shot at Light, he is easily able to counter them all with some ice magic, leaving Kido in utter disbelief. He begins throwing a temper tantrum because he can't accept that a human is actually better than him, and he starts talking about how with the great sword of the ancient Maestro, he shouldn't be losing like this. Light honestly wasn't paying much attention, but as soon as he heard Kido mention a Maestro, he becomes invested because this is the kind of information he's been looking for. Light asks how Kido knows about Maestros, but he laughs and says there's no way he wouldn't know about it. After all, he was born with the blood of a Maestro. After learning that Kaido is a descendant of a master, Light tells Nemumu and Gold that there has been a change of plans. He was originally going to just kill Kaido, but now he wants to take him back to the abyss and rip as much information as he can right out of his head. The two understand, so they tell him they'll handle Yannick while he's busy with Kaido, but Yannick doesn't think it's fair that they are ganging up on him when he isn't a combatant. However, he has something prepared for situations like these, so he points their attention towards the two servants he has behind him, and they begin to transform, revealing that they are the results of Yannick's human-monster hybrid experiment. He then begins ranting about how he combined humans with monsters in order to surpass the natural limit on their bodies, and he would have done a lot more than this. But it takes a lot of human lab rats to make a stable hybrid, so he plans to gather even more humans to experiment on whenever he gets the chance. Nemamu, Gold, and Light are disgusted by Yannick's actions, but what's even more horrifying is the fact that Light actually recognizes one of them. It was the man he met in town a while back, and he regrets not being able to save him from falling victim to Yannick's twisted experiments. But there's nothing he can do to save him now, so Light asks Nemamu and Gold to put the monster out of their misery. Nemamu and Gold effortlessly slice through the hybrids' bodies to put an end to their suffering, but Yannick still has that smug look on his face and tells them they haven't won yet. He designed the monsters to be able to regenerate from any damage they take, so they are going to have to do a lot more than that if they want to kill the hybrids. Light is starting to get a little concerned about Nemamu and Gold, but he doesn't have any time to go check on them because Kaido keeps spamming sword blasts. Nemamu and Gold try slashing at the hybrids a few more times, and no matter what they do, the monsters keep regenerating, and Yannick is calling them fools for thinking they could defeat his creations. Nemamu and Gold are getting sick of listening to Yannick's constant prattling, and they don't want to prolong the suffering of the unfortunate humans, so they decide to use their special moves to end their suffering quickly. They both coat their weapons in mana and slash at the hybrids, and Yannick begins mocking them again because he believes they stand no chance of killing his monsters. But then he realizes the hybrids aren't getting back up, and they look pretty dead to me. He begins panicking because he can't believe all the fruits of his research could be erased so easily, but while he's standing over the ashes of his victims, Nemamu comes up from behind and kicks him in the nuts to make sure she doesn't have to listen to any more of his nonsense. As for Light, he has been overwhelming Kaido with his magic for a while now, and every time an attack comes close to hitting him, Kaido gets a look of sheer terror on his face, and Light finds this amusing since Kaido was acting all high and mighty a moment ago. Kaido refuses to let a worthless human look down on him, so he gets back up and activates the Holy Sword's ultimate form, enchanting the blade with multiple types of magic and extending his effective attack range. Light is somewhat impressed since the sword seems incredibly versatile, but as cool as it looks, Kaido's aim is garbage, so he can't hit Light at all. He starts whining that Light is a coward for dodging the attacks, and says Light would be dead meat if he could land a hit on him. That's kind of the whole point of dodging attacks in the first place, but Light decides to humor Kaido a little, so he stands perfectly still and tells him to take his best shot. Kaido thinks Light must have gone crazy, but there's no way he's passing up this opportunity, so he raises his sword and leaps into the air to land a clean strike on Light. But while the sword strike definitely connected, it didn't actually do much. Kaido can't believe what just happened because it should be impossible for a human to tank a direct hit from Grandius, and just to make sure the difference in strength is clear, Light tells Kaido he can keep trying if he wants. Kaido takes swing after swing at Light, and every single attack does absolutely zero damage, until Light eventually gets sick of being hit and shatters Grandius's enchantment. He then gut checks Kaido and sends him flying with a punch to the face. By the time Kaido finally stops rolling on the ground, his face is messed up, and Light stands over him menacingly. He says he has a lot of questions for Kaido, so he won't kill him yet, at least not until he has suffered pain several times worse than what he put all his victims through. Kaido can tell that Light isn't bluffing, and there's no way he can fight his way out of this situation, so he resorts to begging for his life. He tells Light that he is from the Elven Nation, and he was once next in line to become captain of the White Knights, so he will give Light whatever information he wants as long as he has mercy. Kaido looks really pathetic right now, and the sight of his face really pisses Light off because he was calling himself a legendary hero before, yet he is giving up so easily. A hero is meant to fight to the bitter end for what they believe in, even when the odds aren't in their favor, but as arrogant as he is, Kaido couldn't even do that. If anything, Elio, Gimra, and Wardy are the real heroes here because they stood up to Kaido and Yannick to protect Mira, even though they knew they stood no chance. Light apologizes to the corpses of Gimra and Wardy for not being able to save them, but he says he will do everything in his power to make sure Elio survives, so they will be heading back to the Abyss immediately. Just then, Kaido speaks up and asks what's going to happen to him, so Light says he is going to take him and Yannick back home as well because he has a lot of questions he wants answered. A moment later, Light activates his teleportation magic, and by the time Kaido and Yannick open their eyes, they are shocked to find themselves in a completely different area. Yannick can't believe what just happened, so he asks Light where they are right now, and he is told that they are in the deepest part of the Abyss dungeon. Yannick is shocked when he learns that they were sent all the way from the dungeon in Dages to the Abyss dungeon, but he doesn't understand what Light brought them here for. Light says this is just where he lives, but Yannick and Kaido refuse to believe that any person would be willing to live in the world's most challenging dungeon. As soon as they say this, Nemamu starts stomping on Yannick's back for daring to imply that Light is lying, and moments later, the others arrive to see what all the commotion is about. They are pleased that Light has returned to pay them a visit, but they wonder why he brought those ugly elves with him. Light explains that these two are heinous criminals who conducted horrific experiments on innocent humans, resulting in the deaths of many, including two of Light's friends, but they happen to have information on what a master is, so he decided to put off killing them for now. As soon as the girls hear what Kaido and Yannick have done, they all start staring at the two with murderous intent and talking about all the ways they plan to make them suffer for what they have done. Light expected that kind of reaction from the four of them, but he makes it clear that they aren't allowed to kill these two until they have gotten every last bit of information about masters from them, and they all agree to hold themselves back if that's what Light wants. In the meantime, Light asks Gold to take care of healing Elio, and he wants Nemamu to come with him because he plans to give Gimra and Wordy a proper funeral. He is about to turn to leave, but all of a sudden, Yannick begs him to wait and pleads with Light to reconsider punishing him because this whole thing was Kaido's fault. But Kaido says Yannick is the one to blame because he told him he would be able to help push past his physical limits as long as he helped gather research subjects. They begin arguing over whose idea this whole thing was in the first place, but Light cuts them off and asks a simple question. While they were parading themselves around like gods, killing and torturing the weak humans like worms, did they ever show mercy when they begged for their lives? Kaido and Yannick completely freeze because they know they never showed even an ounce of mercy to any of their victims, and their silence tells Light everything he needs to know. So he says they will be getting the same treatment, and there's nothing they can do about it. A little while later, Mia wakes up at the inn in Dagas, and she sees Light sitting next to her bed. So she asks him what happened since the last thing she remembers is being chased by Kaido. Light tells her that he and the others happened to find her just as the adventurer killers were about to capture her, so they brought her back to the inn so she could rest. Light also tells her that they managed to heal Elio's injuries and save his life as well, but when she asks what happened to Gimra and Wordy, he unfortunately doesn't have any good news to share. He hands her a lock of their hair and tells her that Gimra and Wordy died from their injuries before he could get there. And Mia is devastated by the news, but she is still very grateful that Light came to help, since without him, she and her brother never would have survived. Light gets up to give her some time to sort out her feelings, but he does feel a little guilty because times like this make him wonder if using his strength solely for the purpose of revenge is really the right thing to do. The next morning, Light heads over to the guild to report the adventurer killer incident and provide all the relevant information. However, he leaves out the part about him taking Kaido and Yanni into custody, so the guild still thinks they are out there somewhere. As a reward for the valuable information Light provided, as well as for saving two potential victims, he and his party are officially promoted to C rank. Later on, Light sits down to have a chat with Mia and Elio, and he asks them what they plan to do now, so Elio tells him they are going to quit adventuring and move back to their hometown. Light asks why they want to quit since he's sure they could find another party to team up with. But while that may be true, it wouldn't feel right to form another party so soon after Gimra and Wordy died. Besides, they also need to take what's left of them home so they can hold a funeral for their beloved friends. Light understands the sentiment, but he asks what Mia plans to do about her magic studies since the whole reason she became an adventurer in the first place was so she could earn enough money to attend the academy. Mia says she's going to focus on self-studying for the time being, and she is going to work hard so that by the next time she runs into Light, she is no longer a novice. After Mia and Elio leave, Light decides to head back to the Abyss to see how things are going over there, and upon arrival, he is greeted by May and Ellie. He asks them for a status update on their investigation, and May presents him with a file containing everything they were able to learn from Kaido and Yannick. Apparently, descendants of a maestro are known to have an easier time leveling up, and there is a legend that says if a maestro is left unchecked, it could lead to the destruction of the entire world. This revelation gets Light curious about how powerful a maestro must be to have the potential to destroy the whole world single-handedly, but unfortunately, they don't have any more information on the topic. What they have learnt so far came from a conversation Kaido had with the captain of the White Knights a few years ago, and even though Ellie used her forbidden magic to extract as much of the memory as possible, it was still severely fragmented, so they couldn't learn much. Light asks what condition Yannick and Kaido are in now, so Ellie opens a portal to show him, and those two look like they've been through hell. Since there's no more information to be gotten, Light decides it's time to get rid of them, so he summons a creature called Dead Man's Banquet, and it devours Kaido and Yannick in incredibly brutal fashion. Now that that's been taken care of, he asks Ellie how things are going with her other operation. She cheerfully tells him that all preparations are complete so he can begin his revenge on Sasha whenever he wants. But first, she'd like to start by capturing the White Knights since all their members are apparently sub-maestros, and she isn't sure what they are capable of. The vice captain of the White Knights, Mikhail, also happens to be engaged to Sasha, so Ellie thinks he would make a good hostage, and Light is impressed by how well she has thought this out. Meanwhile, over in the Elf Nation, Sasha is having a good old time telling Mikhail about how she betrayed and made Light beg for his life with a pitiful expression on his face, and Mikhail seems to be enjoying the story a lot. He even wishes he could have been there to see it in person, because he was sent once on a mission to eradicate a human village, and he loved how pitiful the humans looked as they begged for their lives. The two of them are having a lot of fun talking about how much they enjoy watching humans suffer, but at the same time, Light is getting ready to repay Sasha for all the pain and suffering she inflicted on him. After her little date with Michael, Sasha returns home with her maid, and along the way the maid comments on how good they look as a couple. However, their path is soon blocked when a human slave drops a bunch of food on the road because an elf started whipping him for no reason, and the only thing Sasha can think of right now is how useless all humans are. It's going to take a while to move all the food out of the road, so she stares out the window in boredom while she waits, but that's when she sees a familiar silhouette walking down the alleyway. Sheer dread takes hold of her as she darts out of her carriage to make sure that wasn't really Light, but after searching the entire alley, she finds no sign of him. So she starts trying to convince herself that there's no way that could have been Light because he died years ago. However, as she turns around, she finds a note stuck to the wall telling her to come to the giant tower, and it was signed by Light, so she starts freaking out. Her maid soon comes running to check on her and finds Sasha on the ground in despair because if Light really is alive, then she's going to lose everything she gained from killing him, including all the reward money, her noble status, and even her engagement to Mikhail. Meanwhile, from a nearby rooftop, Light and Ellie watch Sasha panicking on the floor, and this is a nice start to Light's revenge, but Ellie has much worse in store for Sasha. But she's not the only one with a heavy dose of karma heading their way, because over in the White Knight camp, two of the knights, Nia and Kia, are having the time of their lives fermenting a human slave by using him as a human dartboard. And while that's going on, Sharfet over here is shoving his face deep in the chest of his human slave, and she is forced to play along because she doesn't want to end up as the next dartboard. This meeting was called to discuss the fact that after Keto disappeared with the holy sword Grandius, he apparently went around killing adventurers and was defeated by a human, so the higher-ups want them to go in and clean up his mess. Sharfet doesn't understand why they should have to deal with the problem that Keto created, but Musk gets up and reminds him that Keto was one of their members, so they are directly responsible for anything he does. While Sharfet is still busy fraternizing, the screams of the man getting tortured are starting to annoy him, so he tells Nahia and Kaya to cut it out already and just kill him. But they refuse because they are having a lot of fun. They bought the slave with their own money, so they should have the right to do whatever they want with him, and they find it way more disturbing that Sharfet enjoys making out with humans so much. Musk tells everyone to stop arguing so much because they are White Knight, and personally, he believes that it is his duty to give humans a swift and fleeting death so they don't have to suffer through their pathetic lives, but they don't agree with his ideology at all. Throughout this whole squabble, the Knight Captain has been trying to keep his cool, but the others are really getting on his nerves now, so he tells them to be quiet, and the anger in his voice carries so much weight that it literally has all of them quaking in fear, and even give a bird a heart attack. Now that they are all quiet, he tells Nahia and Kia that it's bad form to torment their victims so much, so he tells Sharfet to put the poor guy out of his misery. Sharfet obeys the captain's command and points a finger at the man, and in an instant his head is blown clean off his body. The captain then tells Nia and Kia to get rid of the corpse, and the woman on Sharfet's lap is terrified by what just happened, but he tells her there's no need to worry because he'd never do that to her. He then says she is free to leave now, so she gets up and takes her leave, and once she's gone, the captain tells Sharfet that he is free to have whatever hobbies he chooses, but he should limit his fraternizing with humans. Elves are known for mating with human masters to create submasters, so he can't go thinning out the bloodline with his affair. However, Sharfet tells the captain there's nothing to worry about because he was never actually going to have a child with his slave in the first place. In fact, he has gotten pretty bored of her, so he was thinking of shooting her in the back later, and he invites the captain to join in on the fun, but he declines because while he doesn't like humans, he doesn't particularly enjoy torturing them either. For now, his only priority is to deal with the situation regarding Keto, because he can't let anyone embarrass their queen. Later that night, Sasha is laying in bed when all of a sudden she hears a loud noise, and when she goes to look out of her window, she finds a giant tower emerging from the forest, and the sight of it sends chills down her spine because she recalls that Light's letter told her to meet him at a tower, and this must be what it was referring to. The next morning, a slave trader is driving into town with a wagon full of human children, but all of a sudden, a rock chimera appears out of nowhere and the slave trader is terrified for his life, so he runs away, leaving the kids to their fate, but the monster doesn't actually seem interested in hurting them. A little while later, the elves in the city have started experiencing a shortage in food supply because all the trade routes are infested with monsters now. The elves think it has something to do with the giant tower that randomly appeared recently, and the nation is apparently investigating it, but they are short-handed at the moment, so they are offering adventurers good money for any information on it. Light, Gold, and Nemumu are also in the crowd of adventurers, and after a few minutes, a pair of elves notice Nemumu, and even though she's human, they think she's hot, so they walk over and try to convince her to ditch Light and join their party instead. Nemumu restrains herself and simply tells the two to get lost because Light is the only one she will ever serve, and Light tells them they had better give up while they still can. But the elves get offended that a human would dare to reject them, so one of them throws a punch. However, Light casts a lightning arrow to force him back, and as soon as everyone realizes what just happened, they recognize him and the others as the new party of humans from Dagas who are apparently extremely powerful. Knowing that they can't beat Light, the elves back off, and Light is pleased with how this turned out because news of his presence in the elf nation is bound to spread now. Meanwhile, out in the forest, a group of elf adventurers decided to take on the quest to gather information about the giant tower, but to be safe, they forced a little human girl to come with them, so they can use her as a diversion if they get attacked. After all, the only thing human slaves are good for is to act as bait, and when the girl falls to the ground because she's too exhausted to move, the elves threaten to beat her senseless until she gets back on her feet. They start complaining amongst themselves about how lazy the livestock is, but all of a sudden, one of them notices a drop of saliva land on his hand, and in the next moment, his head is completely chomped off by the rock chimera. The chimera then takes a bite out of the other elves, and the little girl falls to her knees in terror because she thinks she's going to be next. But as the monster approaches and takes a whiff of her, it realizes she is a human, so it backs off and walks away. The girl breathes a sigh of relief because she thinks she is finally safe, but just then, a group of scary-looking men come out of the woods and start talking about how lucky they are to find one out here. The girl is on the brink of crying because she thinks she's about to be enslaved again, but to her surprise, the men dump a bottle of healing potion on her and start talking about getting her a set of proper clothes and some food. It turns out that they are actually part of Light's team, and they were tasked with rescuing as many human slaves as they can, so the leader of the group contacts Oyuki to organize a drop-off at the secure location. Meanwhile, up on the tower, Oyuki is hard at work, controlling all the monsters in the area to make sure they only target the elves that are harming humans when all of a sudden, Ellie comes over to check on her. She asks Oyuki how she's holding up since this is the first time she has had to control so many monsters on the surface at once, but she says she's doing fine. Still, Ellie is worried that there might be issues with the mission, or that this might all be a test from Light to see how they handle moral dilemmas, but Oyuki tells her she's overthinking it because everything has gone according to plan so far. Just then, she gets a message from the ground team, and they tell her they are ready to make the drop off. So once they arrive at the village, they leave the girl in the care of the village, so she should be safe from now on, and she is very grateful for all they have done for her. As they are returning to their base, they start talking about how awful it is that humans are being used as monster bait, and they wonder why the other races even hate humans so much in the first place, but they can't come up with any real answers. Their leader tells them there's no point in pondering it now, because they'll be leaving bright and early tomorrow morning, so they had better not be late. That night, Sasha is sitting in her room grinding her teeth over the fact that she can't get to the tower alone because there are monsters over level 1000 in there. At this rate, it won't be long before the nation officially mobilizes the White Knights, and if they make it to the tower before her, they are going to find out that she didn't actually kill Light, and she can't let that happen. So she needs to figure out a way to make it over there so she can finally finish Light off with her own hands. The next morning, the Elven Council holds a meeting to discuss what to do about the recent rise in monsters, and since they aren't fully aware of what the monsters are capable of, one of the officials suggests that they should send in their best forces before any harm befalls the citizens, and she asks the White Knight captain what he thinks about the plan. Hardy says he is aware how important it is that they keep their citizens safe, but he can't agree with such an idiotic plan. Sending the White Knights out with no clear intel would be like using a fine sword to poke through the mud, and no matter how good a sword is, it remains useless if you don't know where to strike. The Queen sides with Hardy on this matter and decided that the best course of action would be to increase the reward for information on the tower, and once they have gathered sufficient intel from the adventurers, they will dispatch the White Knights. No one can go against the Queen's orders, so the meeting is concluded, but the Chancellor seems to be holding a grudge because he thinks the only reason the Queen sided with Hardy is due to the fact that she's his mother. Later on, Hardy heads to his mother's chambers to thank her for supporting him because now he and his men won't have to go out and do the dirty work in person. His mother laughs and says she'd never let her precious son be out in any serious danger, but the mystery of the giant tower is a pressing issue, so they will need to deal with it soon. He asks if she thinks this might be the coming of another Dark Lord, but that's not necessarily what the Queen is worried about. If a Dark Lord is born, then that would mean a hero would be born from the heroes as well, and they are likely to be a master, so if that's the case, the elves are going to need to either win them over or kill them to avoid being destroyed. Speaking of which, Hardy recalls hearing about a potential master a few years back, but the Queen says the boy turned out to be regular, so he was apparently disposed of. She asks why he's so interested, but Hardy says he was just thinking about how he would have loved to be a part of that mission because he thinks all humans are pests who deserve to be eliminated. The next morning, the guild posts even more quests for information on the giant tower, and a ton of adventurers show up, including Light and the others, but while they are walking, Sasha happens to pass by and she recognizes Light's voice, so she turns around and demands that he show her his face immediately. Light tries to play it cool and tells her that he's wearing a mask to cover burn marks on his face, so he can't remove it, however. Sasha completely ignores him and smacks the mask right off his face. As much as Light really wants to crash out on Sasha right now, that would undermine the grand revenge plot he spent years preparing for. So instead, he remains calm and pulls his hood back, revealing a terrible burn all across his face. Sasha can't recognize Light's face with all the gruesome burns, and she thinks it looks so disgusting that she yells at him for tainting her eyes with such a foul sight, even though she was the one who demanded to see it. After Sasha is gone, Light reveals that he didn't actually burn himself just for the sake of keeping his identity hidden, and the marks on his face are just illusions created by the mask. He's just glad it was effective enough to trick Sasha into leaving him alone for now, but as they step into the forest, the pair of elves that Light humiliated earlier seem to still be holding a grudge against him. Light notices the elves chasing after him, but he's got bigger things to deal with right now, so he decides to give them a chance and warns them to back off if they don't want to die. However, the elves think he is bluffing because there's no way a human would be able to beat them, so they keep chasing after him, and Light just chooses to ignore them for now since they aren't worth stopping to deal with. A little while later, Light and the others eventually arrive at the agreed-upon meeting spot, but no one else is here yet, so it looks like they are going to have to wait a few minutes. However, just then, those two elves manage to catch up, and Light is sincerely impressed that they were able to keep up with him all the way here. Their dedication is truly commendable, but it's too bad that that's the only good thing about them. Light already gave them a fair warning, yet they still insist on fighting him, so he is left with no other choice. He calls out to Mara and asks her to handle these two for him. And all the while, the two elves are mocking Light to their heart's content because they think they are about to make him pay for disrespecting them. However, the smiles on their faces quickly vanish as soon as Mara shows up and she tells them it's already too late to beg for their lives because from the moment they started insulting Light, their fates were sealed. Mara then proceeds to devour the two whole, and after she's done, Light apologizes for wasting her time with such a trivial matter, but she says it's no big deal because for him, she would gladly devour 1,000 elves even though they taste terrible. A little while later, the rest of the team arrive and Light is glad to see them. He asked them to come here so they could escort him through the forest to the tower since flying there isn't an option with so many other adventurers around. Suzu takes charge and begins leading the way back to the tower, and along the way, Gold says he's glad to see Jack again, but he's surprised that he took the time to come all the way out here when he didn't have to. Jack explains that it was mostly Ellie's idea for him to come here, but he also didn't want to leave the Lightster alone to do all the hard work by himself. After hearing Jack call Light the Lightster, all the girls immediately become hostile towards him because of a lack of formality, but Jack thinks they are a bunch of hypocrites because, for one, Light never asked them to be overly formal with him. And two, if they keep distancing themselves from Light with formalities, then he's going to end up on a lonely pedestal with nothing but servants instead of friends, and if that's what they want to happen to Light, then Jack is more than willing to throw hands to knock some sense into them. However, before a fight could break out, Light tells Jack to calm down because he doesn't want him causing a scene out here. And the same goes for the girls, so everyone falls back into line and continues walking toward the tower. The tension between them was still pretty high at first, but at the end of the day, none of them really hate each other, so things settle down pretty quickly. Though Light isn't exactly sure what Suzu over there is thinking. She suffers from extreme shyness, so she isn't able to talk to anyone other than her trusty musket lock, which is a shame since Light has a ton of questions about her. Like the fact that her summoning card listed her as androgynous, so he isn't sure if she's a girl or a boy, and he can't exactly check for himself, so he's just been going off assumptions. The group eventually arrives, and Light thinks Ellie did an amazing job creating the tower because it looks really imposing up close. The quadruple nines all rush down to meet Light, and now that everyone is here, Ellie opens up the entrance so she can give Light a full tour. She created this place using the information she gathered from analyzing the core of the Abyss dungeon, and it is completely reinforced, so there's no risk of any physical or magical interference from outside. She's also got her new pet dragon, which she summoned to help with the revenge plan, and as requested, she converted the top floor to a wedding venue for the grand finale. Light walks up to the throne Ellie built for him, and since everyone is here, Ellie asks Light for permission to use this opportunity to fill them all in on the details of the plan. Light has no problem with it, so she explains that Light plans to execute his revenge right as Sasha is about to marry into the royal family, but she made a few adjustments to avoid getting interrupted by any unwanted wedding crashers. This is the first time Light is hearing of this, so he asks Ellie what changes she made, and she explains that since the White Knights are renowned as the strongest warriors in the Elf Kingdom, they are bound to try intervening in Light's plans, so she made arrangements to fight and defeat them beforehand. That way, they can test their military might against the Elf Kingdom's finest, and at the same time, with the White Knights defeated, they will be able to bend the Elf Nation to their will and gather information on the Masters a lot easier. Light agrees that Ellie's additions to the plan are helpful, and additionally, once they have control over the Elf Nation, they will be able to probe into the other nations as well with this tower as their base of operations. And in order to prevent arousing suspicion, Ellie went to the liberty of creating a shadow clone of Light to carry out his adventuring duties while the real Light is busy with his revenge. Light is impressed by how much thought Ellie has put into this, and as they speak, Oyuki is controlling several monsters to lead Sasha right here. Out in the forest, we see Sasha and the party of elves she hired as guards hiding in the bushes because they know they stand no chance against the monsters in this area, and little by little as they try to evade detection, they are being directed right towards the tower. And once they arrive, they will be greeted by Ellie's new pet. As expected, Sasha soon arrives near the tower, and as soon as she sees the dragon, she freaks out and turns around because she knows there's no way she can handle a monster like that on her own. The only people who'd be able to defeat it are the White Knight, but she's hesitant to call them for help because she doesn't want them to find out that Light might still be alive. Back at the top of the tower, everyone watches Sasha leave, but Ellie is certain that she will eventually return with the White Knights in tow because she simply has no other choice here. And when she does, the White Knights will be forced to face the strongest warriors of the Abyss, and she's sure Light will find it entertaining. Later that night, Sasha calls a meeting with the Elven Council to inform them of what she encountered during her attempt to make it to the tower today. Not only were there dozens of monsters roaming around the forest that are far stronger than any ordinary elf, but she also found a dragon nesting near the tower itself, and this gets the Queen's attention because she never could have imagined that such a powerful creature would show up here. The Queen honestly finds it hard to believe, but Sasha insists that she is telling the truth. And as a matter of fact, the Chancellor happened to receive a similar report not too long ago from a human party that mentions similar things to what Sasha just told them about. And if two independent sources are saying the same thing, then it must be true. Now that they have confirmed that the information is credible, the Chancellor asks Hardy what he intends to do because with adequate information about what he will be up against, there should be no reason for him to avoid mobilizing the White Knight. Hardy is backed into a corner here, so he is forced to get up and announce that he will be leading an expedition to defeat the fearsome monsters and uncover the mystery of the tower. Later on, Sasha meets with the Chancellor to ask him for permission to join the White Knight on their mission, claiming that she simply wants to be involved in ensuring the safety of the Elf Nation, but the Chancellor tells her there's no need to plead so much because he had already intended to send her on the mission. After all, such a noble act would do wonders for her image after she gets married to Mikhail, but he does have one condition. He insists that Sasha borrow an artifact from her father's collection since otherwise she'd be nothing but a hindrance to the White Knight. Sasha agrees, so later that night, she meets with her father to ask for a favor, and the next morning, she heads out to meet the White Knights at the edge of the forest. Most of the White Knights don't understand why they need to bring Sasha along on a mission like this, but Mikhail assures them that she is strong enough to handle herself, and even if something does go wrong, he will be there to protect her. Ninja and Kaya think that the only reason Sasha was allowed to join the mission was because the Chancellor is really close to Mikhail, but it's not like she's totally useless since she's the only one who knows exactly how to get to the tower, so they need her to lead the way. Back at the tower, Light is watching as Sasha and the White Knights close in on the tower, and he is practically shaking with excitement at the thought of finally being able to exact revenge on her, and he can't wait to see what kind of twisted face she makes when she sees him. As Sasha and the Knights make their way through the forest, they ask her if she's sure she knows where she's going, and she assures them that she's absolutely certain this is the right way because she left marks on the trees last time she came through here. In fact, she sees one of the marks up ahead, but as she runs over to inspect it, she accidentally trips over a few roots and nearly falls. However, Mikhail catches her in time and he tells her that while he understands that she is eager to make it to the castle, he would hate to see her get hurt out here, so she needs to be careful. They eventually arrive at the tower and it's every bit as impressive as they thought it would be. Mikhail congratulates Sasha for doing such a good job leading them here, but all of a sudden, the doors to the tower open up and a bunch of rock monsters emerge. The White Knights could probably chip away at their numbers right now, but Hardy thinks it's too risky, so he tells them to wait for the diversion they paid those adventurers to create. A little while later, a bunch of fireworks are launched in the forest, alerting the monsters and causing them to run off to find whatever caused it. Now, the only monster left to deal with should be the dragon somewhere inside, so Hardy tells everyone that they will be heading inside soon and casts his signature silence spell. The spell is special because it eliminates all sound within range, creating a zone of complete silence and allowing them to move without being detected. However, as they are running, they suddenly end up falling into a teleportation trap, and in the next moment, all of them are split up into different rooms of the tower. Sasha and Mikhail realize they must be somewhere else in the tower, so Mikhail tells her to stay behind him in case something happens as they make their way up. But little do they know that they are heading right into Light's trap, and the second those doors open, it will all begin. Meanwhile, Kia and Nihia are also lost in the tower, so they decide to try looking for the others so they can regroup as soon as possible. However, all of a sudden, they hear the sound of footsteps approaching, and it turns out to be Icehot and Mara. They are both arguing over who gets to take care of the prey first, and after hearing those two call them prey, Nihia and Kaya become greatly offended. They ask the two who they think they are, and Mara responds saying they are their opponents, though she doesn't think this is going to be much of a battle since Nia and Kia are nowhere near strong enough to pose a threat to them. Hearing this really sets the twins off because they refuse to be looked down upon by a pair of insignificant humans, so they begin dashing around the room and declare that they will slice off all of their limbs and turn them into toys, all while Mara and Icehot watch in amusement. Elsewhere in the tower, Sharfet is all alone and he is really disappointed in himself for failing to spot that teleportation trap before it activated. He has no idea where he is, but he can sense someone watching him from around the corner, so he yells for them to get out here and talk to him face to face already. Moments later, Suzu steps out from behind a pillar and Sharfet is immediately smitten by how cute she is, so he starts asking what her name is, but Suzu is really creeped out by his behavior. Locke, her rifle, suddenly speaks up and tells Sharfet that Suzu won't respond because she doesn't talk much and she's not interested, and they didn't come here to have a friendly chat either. Sharfet is amazed because it's rare to see a talking weapon, but he thinks it's really bad luck that he has to fight them because he'd much rather fight Suzu in bed, but Suzu says he really isn't her type. Sharfet remains persistent and asks what her type is, so Suzu begins describing her ideal man. But Locke points out that her description matches Light exactly, and to put it bluntly, she has no chance of winning Light over romantically. He's technically right, but Suzu really didn't want to hear that. So she starts smashing Locke against a wall until he apologizes, and all the while, Sharfet is watching in confusion. He's not sure who Light is supposed to be, but if Suzu insists on fighting him, then he's going to have to show no mercy. He activates an invisible crossbow on his arm and fires a bolt at her, and while it does catch her off guard, she's able to parry the shot and return fire instantly. Sharfet blocks Suzu's shot, and he is intrigued by her since there aren't many people who can block one of his invisible crossbow bolts, and likewise, Locke is impressed that Sharfet was able to block one of his shots, so this may actually be a bit fun. At the same time, back with Nihia and Kia, they are still bouncing around the room, and Icehot and Mara are starting to get sick of waiting for them to do something. All of a sudden, the twins both simultaneously cast a wind cutter spell, and it's actually pretty powerful, so Mara and Icehot are forced to dodge. Mara admits that she may have underestimated the twins because being able to cast spells instantly while moving at such high speeds makes them difficult to deal with, but handling this much isn't a problem for them. However, Nia and Kaya say they've still got a lot left in the tank, so in the next moment, they both unleash a massive wave of wind cutter spells, forcing Icehot and Mara to go on the defensive, and once Nihia spots an opening, he throws a dagger into Mara's back, rendering her immobile while Kaya swoops in and chops her arm off. The twins begin mocking Mara for thinking she stood a chance against them, and they say they are going to chop off Icehot's leg next, but to their surprise, Mara doesn't seem fazed by the fact that she just lost an arm. She tells Kaya to take a good look at his sword, and that's when he realizes that despite the fact that he chopped off Mara's arm, there's no blood on his blade. And the same goes for the dagger that Nana threw into her back. Mara then proceeds to eat her severed arm, and her body immediately begins to regenerate like new. Nahia and Kia are terrified by what they just witnessed because they've never seen someone who can regenerate their limbs before, but Mara tells them she can do way more than this. Just to prove her point, Mara then proceeds to rip off her own head and juggle it around. And this is the craziest thing the twins have ever seen. She explains that her body is made of an amalgamation of different creatures, so killing her is next to impossible, and in case they are wondering, she informs them that her level is 7,777. Ice Hot adds that her level is the same as Mara's, so they both far outrank the twins, but they refuse to believe it. They've never heard of people with such high levels before, so they assume Mara and Ice Hot must be bluffing, because if their levels were really that high, then they wouldn't have needed to dodge those attacks earlier. Ice Hot explains that that was all Mara's idea to make this battle more entertaining for Light by messing with them, so they pretended to be weaker than normal to give them a false sense of confidence. The twins still refuse to accept it and launch another wave of wind slashes at the two, but this time Mara and Ice Hot decide not to move. All the slashes literally bounce off their bodies. Nia and Kia are starting to get desperate, so they rush in to attack the two with their swords, but even though they didn't defend themselves at all, the strikes had no effect, and it was at this moment that Nia and Kia realized that they were sorely outmatched, so they did the only reasonable thing they could think of. They took off. Ice Hot refuses to let them get away, so she prepares to attack, and Mara forms a shield to protect herself so she doesn't get caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, Sharfet is still fighting Suzu, and so far she's been doing nothing but dodging his attacks, so he begins provoking her on to fight back. At one point, he corners her with a large barrage of shots, but she manages to come out unscathed, which really impresses him, so he asks her once again to become his girlfriend. After all, whoever this light guy she likes is, there's no way a loser like that is good enough for her. However, saying that was the biggest mistake of his life because till now, Suzu had just been treating him as a mild annoyance, but as soon as those words left Sharfet's mouth, she had nothing but murderous intent aimed towards him. Back with Nia and Kia, they've just run into a wall in their attempt to flee, so Kia suggests they should run along it since it will eventually lead them to an exit. However, all of a sudden, they are hit with a sudden heat wave, and realize it must be coming from Ice Hot. At this rate, they'll be burnt to death if they don't do something quickly, so they both agree to work together to create an ice wall. However, immediately after the ice wall is created, it begins to melt under the intense heat, so they are forced to continue casting it over and over until their mana eventually isn't enough to keep up and their bodies begin to burn up. And the crazy part is that Ice Hot hasn't even launched her attack yet, so all that heat was generated just by her charging up her attack. Back on Sharfet's end, he is currently learning firsthand why it's a bad idea to make Suzu angry. She fires countless bullets and has them all locked onto Sharfet, so he is forced to run for his life. He tries countering them with his crossbow, and actually might have been able to put up a good fight against Suzu at max power, but unfortunately for him, each one of her bullets inflicts status elements when it lands, so when the first one hits, he receives the confusion status effect, and from there, he was no longer able to counter her bullets, so he was Swiss cheese shortly thereafter. Kay and Nia are also in terrible shape, but they are still alive thanks to one of the enchantments that Ellie placed on the tower. It automatically limits damage to make sure no one dies prematurely, and it's a good thing too, because without it, these two would be nothing but a pile of ash by now. The two of them are barely able to speak now, but they start begging for mercy. And Mara finds this hilarious because from the information they gathered on them, they always enjoyed tormenting human slaves mercilessly for no reason. She lets them know that mercy is a luxury they won't be provided with because she has orders from Light to interrogate them for information while inflicting as much pain and torment as possible. So they've got a lot of suffering ahead of them. The two try pleading with her not to do this, but before they could even finish speaking, she suddenly forces two eels down their throats to begin their torture. Over on Suzu's end, Sharfet is barely able to move as a result of all the negative status effects she inflicted upon him, but Suzu is still pissed, so she walks up to him and starts stomping on his face. Locke pleads with her to calm down because they have strict orders not to kill Sharfet, plus with her current position, he can definitely see her underwear right now. That last statement snaps Suzu out of her blind fury due to embarrassment, and she now realizes she went way too far. She begins tearing up because she thinks Light is going to be mad at her for ignoring his instructions, but as Light is watching from his throne room, he's not mad, he's just disappointed that the fight ended so early. He is curious about how things are going for Sasha and Mikhail, but he doesn't want to check in on them with the screen because he wants to savor the moment they come through those doors. The two of them have been walking through this hallway for a long time now, and Mikhail is starting to get the feeling that they are being led somewhere. But the only thing on Sasha's mind is finding Light as soon as possible, so she can kill him before anyone else finds out he is alive. Meanwhile, Must is still wandering through the tower before he eventually runs into Jack. Jack apologizes for taking so long to get here, but he's really not interested in the whole holding back gimmick the others are going for, so he straight up tells Must that he is over level 7,000, and it would be in his best interest to surrender before he gets hurt. Must refuses to believe such an outlandish claim because even the captain is only level 3,000, so Jack must be bluffing. Jack doesn't really care if Must believes him or not, but he really doesn't like picking on weaklings, so he plans to make this quick. Must is enraged by the fact that Jack just called him a weakling, so he readies his axe and prepares to strike him down. However, Jack effortlessly swats the axe away and mocks him for being too slow. Must can't believe what just happened, but he refuses to give up and charges back in to attack some more. Yet again, Jack swats away each and every one of Must's attacks, and then he flicks his finger, sending Must straight into one of the pillars. Must has finally realized that Jack far outclasses him in strength, but he still can't grasp the idea of a person over level 7,000 because he didn't know something like that even existed. Still, he refuses to let this be the end up from because he still has so many people to save. But speaking of saving people, Jack has heard all about what Must considers as saving. In his mind, humans are nothing but insects that plague elf kind, so he has deemed it his duty to exterminate them all to save them from their unfulfilling existences. He refuses to let Jack get in his way, so he calls upon his weapon's ability and offers up part of his life force for a power boost. He knows Jack is way stronger than him, so he tells the halberd to shorten his life as much as necessary. And as much as Jack hates Must's ideology, he respects him for having the guts to go all out like this to win, so he decides to do the same. Must brings his axe down on Jack, but to his horror, Jack is once again able to block it easily, and this time his hand has turned black. Jack then shifts into his ultimate form and tells Must that his attack wasn't bad, but he's way out of his league here, so he never stood a chance of winning. After that, Jack punches Must straight in the face, sending him flying into a pillar, and normally, Must would have died from that, but thanks to Ellie's enchantment, his head is still in one piece, so Jack has officially completed his mission. That leaves Hardy as the last White Knight to deal with, and he is up against Mizuna, so this isn't going to end well for him. Mizuna announces that she is the strongest person here, and her master wanted to see how her strength would measure up against the strongest elf, which is why she was told to come fight him. Hardy doesn't think Mizuna is a serious threat, so he tries aura farming a bit and just stands there while ignoring her. Aura farming aside, he can tell that Mizuna isn't bluffing about being strong, and by proxy, that means whoever her master is must be even stronger. But that doesn't matter to him, because he believes he is the pinnacle of strength, so no one could possibly measure up to him in terms of power. He draws his sword and stands there for a few moments, analyzing Mizuna's stance and defenses, but she didn't come here to spend time thinking about attack strategies, so when she gets bored of waiting, she makes the first move and launches a strike so powerful that it blows out a section of the tower wall. Hardy couldn't react to the strike at all, so his sword was cut clean in half, and his body sustained critical damage. Izumi is confused because she didn't think the fight would end so soon, but Hardy is out cold and he's not waking up anytime soon. Just then, Ellie starts yelling at Mizuna over the comms network because she went and destroyed part of the tower for no reason. It can be fixed automatically, but it costs Ellie a tremendous amount of mana to keep this place maintained, so she doesn't like Mizuna causing unnecessary collateral damage. Mizuna apologizes for her mistake, but all of a sudden she hears some sound coming from Hardy's body, and it turns out that he's casting a healing spell on himself. A few moments later, Hardy has been healed enough for him to get back on his feet, and Mizuna isn't sure what she should do because she didn't expect him to be able to recover from her earlier attack. Ellie explains to Mizuna that the only reason Hardy wasn't cut in half earlier is because of the barrier that she put around the tower, so none of the elves can really die within its area of effect. That said, Mizuna is just going to have to subdue Hardy again, but Ellie reminds her to hold back so she doesn't end up destroying the walls again. Mizuna promises to be more careful, and as Hardy gets back on his feet, he apologizes for underestimating Mizuna's strength earlier, but now that he knows she is a formidable opponent, he says he won't make the same mistake again. He immediately activates his silent barrier, but what most don't know is that the barrier actually drains stats from Hardy's opponents and transfers those stats to him. Furthermore, he is able to create an invisible blade that most opponents cannot even perceive, so with his stats gradually increasing and a weapon in hand with immeasurable reach, he wonders how Mizuna plans to respond. To his surprise, he sees Mizuna put her sword away and square up against him, which seems like an odd approach when facing an opponent with an invisible sword, but he's not going to let his guard down. However, in the end, it didn't matter that he kept his guard up because Mizuna was able to perception blitz and punch him so hard that he gets sent flying into the wall. Mizuna is really happy because she managed to hold back enough to keep the wall in one piece, but Ellie is still mad because fixing a cracked wall costs just as much mana as a broken one. Mizuna says she's trying her best out here and she doesn't think it's fair that Ellie is nitpicking every little detail, but Ellie's the one whose mana pool is tied to the tower, so she has every right to be mad. For the sake of peace, Light asks Ellie to cut Mizuna some slack, and since Light is the one insisting, she agrees to let it go for now. She tells Mizuna to just hurry up and bring Hardy to the first floor, and then she cuts the transmission. Light asks Ellie if the mana burden is really too much for her, but she says she's fine. Although, losing large amounts of mana all at once does make her dizzy, so when Mizuna broke those walls, her knees nearly gave out. Just then, Oyuki informs Light that the guests have arrived at the door, and that means the main event will be starting soon, so he instructs the others to be on their best behavior. Meanwhile, outside the door, Sasha and Mikhail are standing there, and they both realize that there must be someone waiting for them in there. But Mikhail is confident that he should be able to handle whatever it is. However, all of a sudden, the door swings open and the two are greeted by Light. He addresses Sasha and says he's glad to see her again, but she only recognizes him as the boy she met in town earlier today, so she doesn't understand why he is acting so familiar. Light jokingly asks how she could forget him when she used to spend so much time cuddling him before, but Sasha vehemently denies the claim because she would never be caught dead fraternizing with a human. However, as she is hurling insults at him, Light slowly removes his mask, and the second his face is visible, Sasha suddenly goes silent. She realizes that he is the same Light from 3 years ago, but this makes no sense because earlier, she saw burn marks all over his face, but he looks completely normal now. Light explains that the burns she saw earlier were just illusions, and as for the reason he looks the same as he did 3 years ago, that's because he stopped his body's aging altogether. Sasha is having trouble wrapping her head around all this because it sounds absurd, but Mikhail interrupts her, spiraling to ask her if this Light person is the maestro candidate that she mentioned before. Sasha stutters a little because she doesn't know how to tell Mikhail that she lied on her report about killing Light herself, but Light cuts her off and begins explaining what happened. He tells them that before Concord could finish him off, he was caught in a teleportation trap and sent to the bottom of the dungeon, but he managed to survive and began preparing for his return to the surface. Mostly because he wanted revenge, but also so he could find answers about why he was targeted and who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. That said, Sasha is next up on his revenge list, which is why he built all this just for her. Sasha is scared shitless right now, but Mikhail, on the other hand, thinks this is a wonderful opportunity because if Light is the one behind the tower's creation, then all they need to do is take him down, and they will be rewarded with great riches and status once they return to the Elf Nation. Sasha is still worried about what might happen to her once the higher-ups find out that she lied about killing Light in her report 3 years ago, but Mikhail tells her there's no need to worry about that because they can just keep that part secret. Sasha feels reassured that Mikhail is still on her side, so she turns back to Light and begins yelling at him for daring to think someone like him deserves to get revenge. Light remains silent in the face of Sasha's rant and simply asks Ellie and Oyuki not to interfere in his battle, and then he steps down from his throne to face Sasha and Mikhail in battle. Sasha finds it hilarious that Light thinks he can take both her and Mikhail all by himself because she is already over level 500, but Light doesn't seem even slightly impressed. Sasha also mentions that she brought a special item with her in case of emergencies, and she proceeds to pull out a horn. Light is curious about what it does, so he decides to wait for Sasha to finish activating it. Once the activation sequence is complete, 3 angel golems appear. Sasha explains that these are Phantasm-class summons, and she says she is going to use them to annihilate him. So she orders the angels to attack. One of the angels rushes forward to attack, so Light is forced to jump out of the way to avoid being hit, and he has to admit that the angel must be pretty strong to be able to crack the tower floor with one attack. He prepares himself to strike back, but before his attack could land, the shield angel stepped forward to tank the blow. Light puts some extra force into his attack until he is eventually able to break through, but he's a bit shocked by the outcome, since he was trying to obliterate both the sword and shield angels, but he was only able to destroy the arms of the shield one. And to make things worse, the one holding the staff in the back is a healer, so it is about to restore the shield angel to full strength in no time. Meanwhile, Sasha is back to being terrified because she never thought Light would be strong enough to damage the Phantasm angels, and when Light notices the panicked expression on her face, he decides to gloat a little and reveals to Sasha that he is currently over level 9000. Sasha is in disbelief at the sight of such an absurdly high level, but Mikhail tells her to calm down because he thinks Light is trying to trick them. First off, he doesn't think it's possible for anyone to reach level 9000, much less a human brat, so that powerful attack he pulled off earlier must have been the result of a magic tool. Sasha agrees with Mikhail, so she sends the angels out to attack Light again, but he's not going to be pulling any punches. First, he uses some earth magic to distract the sword and shield before binding them with shadow magic. And while they are restrained, he proceeds to destroy the healer so the sword and shield won't be able to recover from his attacks anymore. However, Sasha doesn't seem too worried about this because she just blows on the horn again, and by the time Light strikes the sword and shield, Sasha has already resummoned the healer. She laughs and explains that the horn allows her to summon the angels any number of times without consuming any mana, so he's never going to be able to get rid of them. Light realizes the angels are going to be really annoying to deal with if Sasha can just resummon them every time he destroys one, so he decides to take care of the problem at the source by targeting Sasha. However, just when he was about to hit her, Mikhail stepped in to stop him. Light is impressed that Mikhail's shield is strong enough to block one of his attacks, But he says the shield does a lot more than just blocking. All of a sudden, Light finds himself being pushed back by a tremendous force, and it leaves him confused because he doesn't understand what just happened. After seeing the look of confusion on Light's face, Mikhail confidently explains that his shield is a powerful artifact that has the ability to reflect all attacks back to whoever unleashed them. And on top of that, it is also capable of significantly boosting the strength of all of his allies. Mikhail and Sasha are confident that there's no way Light can win now, because the angels will keep respawning no matter how many times he kills them, and he can't do anything about it because Mikhail is here to keep Sasha safe. Sasha begins mocking Light just like she did 3 years ago, and all of a sudden, Light just bursts out in laughter. She finds this odd, but Mikhail thinks Light must have simply been overwhelmed with despair at the realization that he's going to die here. However, that couldn't be farther from the truth, because Light just thought it was funny that they thought they had won, but he tells them they are about to find out what real despair looks like. Ellie and Oyuki soon realize what Light is trying to do, and they plead with him to stop because it's too dangerous, but Light doesn't care about the risk. He proceeds to break the soul seal he had placed on his staff, releasing a terrifying amount of energy as it transforms, and in this state, Mikhail's confidence from earlier is completely shattered. He tells Sasha that they need to take care of Light quickly before he gets a chance to use that weapon, so she orders her angels to attack, but Light effortlessly obliterates them in one go. The power Light possesses like this is immense, but there's a reason he doesn't use this power more often, because the staff's energy is slowly eating away at his defense, so he can't keep this up for long. He's willing to do whatever it takes to make sure Sasha suffers for what she did to him. He begins walking towards Sasha, and in order to stop him, she decides to use the artifact's ultimate move, turning the 3 angels into one unbelievably powerful archangel. She then orders the archangel to strike Light down with its magic, so it spawns a holy javelin right above Light's head. But the second the javelin touches the energy from Light's staff, the holy javelin is completely destroyed. Sasha is really starting to panic now, so she orders the archangel to attack Light again at full power, but none of the javelins have any effect on him, and Light is absolutely loving the look of pure terror on Sasha's face as he approaches. She desperately orders the archangel to protect her, so it unleashes the full strength of its entire arsenal, and its display does look rather impressive, but Light is easily able to disintegrate it with his staff. Mikhail tells Sasha to hurry up and resummon the angel because it's the only thing that can stall Light, but when she tries blowing on the horn again, for some reason it doesn't work. Moments later, the horn crumbles to dust in Sasha's hands, and Mikhail doesn't understand how this is happening because it shouldn't be possible to destroy a Phantasm-class artifact. However, Light explains that his staff is a Genesis-class god killer, capable of erasing the existence of divine entities, so they won't be able to summon any more angels. Mikhail is so stunned by what he just heard that he simply refuses to believe it. There's no way a human like Light could really be over level 9000 or have access to a Genesis-class weapon. Everything that has happened till now must have been a fluke, or at least, that's what he wants to believe. He tells Light that there's still no way he can win this battle because they've still got Mikhail's damage reflection shield, so anything he tries will be sent back his way. I haven't seen levels of cope this high since the time people thought Gojo would come back to life, but anyway, Light proceeds to launch himself at the shield just to prove his strength, and while it does reflect his damage for a while, the power from Light's staff quickly overwhelms it, and the shield is shattered to pieces. That was Mikhail's last line of defense, and he comes to the conclusion that Light must be a maestro, because there's no other explanation for why he's so strong. Light responds saying he's not sure about that because he has been hearing people mention maestros for a while now, but no one ever has an explanation for what a maestro really is. Mikhail says Light's existence is too dangerous to be left unchecked, so he pulls an enchanted feather out of his jacket and raises it to teleport him and Sasha out of here. However, to his dismay, it does absolutely nothing. Light explains that there's no way for him to escape because this entire tower has been enchanted with anti-teleportation magic among other things, but Mikhail refuses to believe that because everyone knows anti-teleportation magic doesn't exist. Ellie chimes in and explains that Mikhail is actually right about that part, because the teleportation jamming spell she used is actually one of her original creations that she developed thanks to her analysis of the Abyss dungeon. It would take too long to explain how she pulled it off, but the point is that there is currently no way to teleport in or out of this tower without Ellie's permission, so Sasha and Mikhail are stuck here. Light tells Mikhail that now is a good time to start running if he wants to, but Mikhail knows he'd never be able to outrun Light. That said, he believes that there's still hope because Captain Hardy is somewhere in this tower, and he alone is above level 3000, so he should be coming to save them any minute now. Light finds it hilarious that Mikhail really thinks the other White Knights are going to come save him, so he orders everyone outside to come in with their prisoners, and to Mikhail and Sasha's horror, they see Light's subordinates walk in with the White Knight members, all of whom are badly injured and one finger prick away from death. They all drop the knights on the floor and Light thanks them for a job well done, but then Jack notices that Light took the seal off his staff, and while he may seem pretty calm, his hand is actively being burned by the staff. Light tells them they don't have to worry about it because this was his choice, and he is capable of handling the staff's backlash for as long as it takes. But for now, he has more important things to do, so he turns back to Mikhail and asks him what his plan is now that he knows the rest of the White Knights have been defeated. There's officially no hope left for Mikhail, so he becomes desperate and tries to negotiate with Light to secure his safety. He offers to team up with Light and help him take over the Elf Queendom, but Light says he has no interest in ruling this awful nation. The only reason he's here is to execute his revenge and find out the truth behind the whole Maestro thing, so there's nothing Mikhail has to offer. In that case, since Light is only interested in getting revenge, Mikhail asks to be released because the one he wants revenge against is Sasha, and Mikhail was neither part of the party that attempted to kill Light, nor does he know why they were ordered to do so. Sasha can't believe Mikhail is throwing her under the bus like this, but he yells at her to leave him out of her mess because he didn't sign up for this, and just to add insult to injury, he tells Sasha that he never really liked her. He was just going along with the engagement so he could raise his status, and he has always thought of her as nothing more than a foolish commoner with delusions of grandeur. Hearing him say all that literally breaks Sasha's heart because she genuinely loved Mikhail, and she thought he loved her back, and Light did come here for revenge, but watching this train wreck is starting to get really uncomfortable. Light interrupts and tells Mikhail that he doesn't really intend to lay a finger on him, but he can't make any promises for Ellie on the other hand. Light gives her permission to do whatever she wants, and Ellie is relieved because it took every ounce of restraint in her body to keep her from disobeying Light's orders and killing these two after all the shit they were talking earlier. That said, she makes it clear that she's going to make their deaths as long and agonizingly painful as possible. Mikhail immediately turns on his heel and starts running for the front door, but Ellie expected him to try to escape, so she casts a thorn binding spell and has several vines grab him before he could make it out. This spell is so strong that even she would have a hard time breaking out if it were used against her, so there's no way Mikhail will be able to escape, and now that he's restrained, she says she's going to start things off by taking a look at his memories. Mikhail groans in agony as Ellie begins sifting through his memories, and Light tells Sasha to watch closely because once Ellie is done with Mikhail, she's next. Sasha is terrified by the thought of being tortured like that, so she tries to gain some sympathy from Light by reminding him of how close they used to be back when he was a part of Concord. However, that was one of the worst things she could have possibly said because the main reason for Light's revenge plan is because he genuinely thought Sasha cared about him, yet he was betrayed in the end, and he remembers every painful detail of Sasha's laughter as he suffered. Sasha insists that it wasn't her fault, and she was just following orders, but that's hard to believe when she clearly looked like she was having fun back then. Sasha then offers to get intimate with Light if he spares her life, but that's crossing the line, and Aoyuki can no longer hold back her anger. Not only did Sasha betray Light, but she also refuses to admit her wrongdoing and continues to disrespect Light by thinking he's a simpleton who can be won over if she offers her body. She says she's going to let her beasts eat Sasha alive, then revive her corpse so she can suffer through the pain all over again. However, before Aoki could do anything, Light tells her to calm down because he's the only one who gets to decide Sasha's fate. Aoki backs off, and Light reassures Sasha that he doesn't plan to kill her, at least not until he has learned the truth about this whole situation and figured out the best way to use his power to change the world. But until then, she will be kept alive while she suffers the worst pain imaginable alongside Garo. He then walks away to leave Sasha to her fate, but before he leaves, he pulls out the arrow Sasha shot at him 3 years ago and launches it into her leg as payback. After that, Mara steps up to execute the punishment Light gave Sasha, and dozens of bugs begin crawling all over and into Sasha's body. Light has finally gotten his revenge on Sasha, but it came at a heavy cost because his staff has eaten away at a lot of his HP, and he collapses from exhaustion moments later. However, before he passes out, he manages to reseal his staff's power and the others rush over to help him. Light is later taken back to the Abyss, but even with the best healing magic at their disposal, Ellie isn't sure Light is going to be okay. After 3 years of using his gotcha skill, the rarest and most powerful item Light ever received was the staff Gungnir, and despite her best efforts, all Ellie was able to learn about it was that it possesses immense power. For safety, Light combined the power of Mei, Ellie, Aoyuki, Nazuna, and himself to form 5 seals to hold back the staff's power, but today he broke one of those seals so he could use it as a weapon, and there's no telling how much damage that kind of energy did to his body, so they just need to wait and hope that he wakes up. Sometime later, Light regains consciousness and Mei is relieved to see that he's alright, but she asks that he refrain from taking such risky measures in the future. She understands how important his revenge is to him, but he has a whole nation of people who look up to him and they wouldn't want anything bad to happen to their king, so she asks him to let them help next time. Meanwhile, over in the Elf Nation, the Queen has just been informed that all contact with the White Knights has been lost, and the Queen begins panicking after hearing this because she doesn't want to believe that Hardy could have lost. However, they have much bigger problems to deal with right now because a scout comes running in to inform the royal court that a large flock of dragons has just invaded the city. The flock is led by Ellie, and using magic, she makes an announcement to everyone in the city. introducing herself as the Witch of the Tower, and explains that yesterday, a group of trespassers called the White Knights entered her tower without permission, and she demands to speak to the people in charge here. Otherwise, she will have her dragons burn the city to the ground, and to make sure they know she's not bluffing, she burns a large section of the forest near the nation. A few minutes later, Ellie lands in the courtyard of the castle, and there she meets the Queen. The Queen tries to take control of the situation and demands that Ellie remove her dragons from this nation immediately, but Ellie calmly points out that they were the ones who invaded her tower with their knights first, so they have no right to complain. The Queen demands to know what happened to her knight, but Ellie says she's the only one who gets to ask questions here, though she figures it would be a lot quicker to just search through the Queen's memories by hand, so she starts walking towards the Queen. A bunch of the guards try to intercept her, but Ellie casually casts a spell that creates a forest of man-eating trees, and within moments, everyone aside from the Queen has been killed. The Queen is terrified, and she knows there's no one in the kingdom who could stand up to power like this, so she starts running for her life, but Ellie easily captures her with a binding spell and proceeds to scan the Queen's memories. Unfortunately, there wasn't much useful information in there, but Ellie did see a lot of how the Queen discriminates against humans here, so Ellie issues an order to her. She declares that from now on, all humans in this nation are to be freed from slavery and given full autonomy, and if anyone objects or interferes with the freedom of a human, they will become food for Ellie's pets. A little while later, Light is back on his feet, so he heads out to meet the other and get a report on how things have been progressing so far. Altogether, around 5,000 humans have been freed from slavery and allowed to settle down in this village, and Ellie has been working towards cultivating the area around the tower so the people can expand and live self-sufficiently. Originally, Light had intended to turn the entire world into a burning hellscape because of everything he had to go through, but now he has changed his mind. Of course, he still plans to carry out his revenge, but discrimination is the problem, not the world itself, so after he's done with his revenge, he plans to do everything he can to make this world a place where everyone can live in peace and happiness. And the others fully support his goal, so they swear to help him in any way possible.